forgotten border town cantina, 5 cartel gunmen just made the worst mistake of their lives, threatening the only bar owner in Texas with 3 CIA covers, 18 confirmed wetwork operations, and a particular set of skills that never quite retired. As they rack their shotguns, his hand drifts beneath the bar, and the manonce known as Specter prepares to resurface. But before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now, back to the video. The air in the El Coyote Cantina turns electric, the ceiling fan slicing through stale cigarette smoke that hangs like a shroud over the weathered wooden bar. Ray Salazar's weathered hands feel the familiar texture of cold steel as his fingers wrap around the modified Beretta strapped beneath the counter. The movement is imperceptible. Muscle memory honed through decades of situations far worse than this. Everybody down. This is Sangre Nueva territory now. The lead gunman's voice cracks with adrenaline, young and dangerous, skull tattoos crawling up his neck like poisonous vines. His companions spread out, tactical despite their bravado, covering exits with military precision, unusual for typical cartel soldiers. The Tuesday night regulars, 3 ranch hands, a retired border patrol agent, and a long-haul trucker freeze in terror. A glass shatters as it hits the floor. The jukebox continues playing Johnny Cash's "God's Gonna Cut You Down," the irony not lost on Ray. In the 3 seconds since the gunmen entered, Ray has already counted their weapons: 2 AR-15s, 3 pistols, and a sword-off. Noted their body armor, cheap but effective, and identified the leader, second from left, hand signals, others defer. Most importantly, he's mapped his first 5 moves and prepared for the 6th through 10th. Just like Kabul in 03, Bogota in 09, Ciudad Juarez in 15. Your boss tried this last month, Ray says, voice preternaturally calm, eyes reflecting nothing. Didn't work out well for him either. His accent has shifted, the border town Spanglish replaced by neutral, accentless English, the voice of a ghost. The lead gunman hesitates, something primal registering danger in Ray's posture. Senor Vega wants your land. The highway expansion makes this property worth millions. You can leave breathing or leave in bags. Ray's eyes flicker to the dusty photograph behind the bar. A younger version of himself standing beside a woman with fierce eyes and a gentle smile. Elena. The reason. He came to this forgotten speck on the map. Their ace, and he stopped killing. The reason he swore never to return to that life. Last chance, old man, the gunman says, failing to hide his nervousness as he levels his weapon at Ray's chest. Time slows for Ray, as it always did in these moments. The overhead light catches on his wedding band. Theone he still wears 3 years after cancer took Eleanor. The promise he made her echoes. No more violence. No more death. A normal life. I'm sorry, Eleanor, he whispers, too softly for anyone to hear. In one fluid motion, Ray drops below the line of fire as the first shots splinter the bar above him. His hand emerges with the Beretta as he simultaneously kicks the panic button installed. Beneath the bar, a direct line to a particular unlisted number in Langley, Virginia, a number that hasn't been used in 3 years. As the gunman's shots shatter bottles and tear through the wooden bar, Ray Salazar knows 2 things, with absolute certainty. First, before dawn, these 5 men will be dead. Second, by triggering that button, Ray Specter Salazar has just forfeited the quiet life he built, dragging himself back into a world he fled, a world of shadows where old friends are potential enemies, where former handlers might welcome him back or tie up a loose end, and where his only real skill has always been precisely measured violence. The ETU, first gunman's head snaps back as Ray's shot finds its mark. 4 left. Specter has resurfaced. Ray Salazar wiped down the weathered bar counter with practiced ease, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows of El Coyote Cantina in thin, dust-filled beams. At 57, his face was a roadmap off fine. Lines, eyes still sharp beneath salt and pepper eyebrows. His movements were efficient, economical. A man who had learned long ago not to waste energy. The cantina sat on the outskirts of San Ignacio, Texas, population 1,872 and shrinking. A forgotten town clinging to existence along the border, 30 miles from the nearest highway, it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, yet secrets still managed to thrive in plain sight. Morning, Ray. Sheriff Dan Morales pushed through the swinging doors, removing his hat as he entered. At 42, Dan was built like a linebacker gone slightly to seed, his uniform stretched tight across his chest. Coffee ready? Ray nodded, pouring a cup without asking how Dan took it. Black, 1 sugar, same as the past 8 years. Early patrol today? Highway Department surveyors are back. 3rd time this month. Dan sipped his coffee, leaning against the bar. They're mapping for that new interstate connector. Got the county commissioners excited about economic revitalization. He made air quotes with his fingers. Ray's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Thought that project was shelved. Apparently, Congressman Martinez found some federal funds. San Ignacio might actually end up on a map people look at. Dan studied Ray's expression. That would be good for business, wouldn't it? Ray continued, wiping glasses. I do all right. Dan snorted. Yeah, your 3 customers a day really keep this place jumping. The truth was, El Coyote didn't need to make money. Ray had purchased it with cash 7 years ago, shortly after marrying Elena. The cantina had been her dream, a gathering place for the community, a small stage for local musicians, a kitchen serving her grandmother's recipes. For 3 years, the place had actually thrived under her touch. Elena had been the heart of El Coyote, greeting customers by name, remembering their stories, creating the warmth Ray could never quite manage on his own. Cancer had taken her quickly, 3 years ago. Ray kept the cantina running out of loyalty to her memory, though the life had drained from the place just as surely as it had from Eleanor. Got a postcard from Miguel yesterday, Dan said, changing the subject. He's doing well at UT Austin, engineering scholarships working out. Ray allowed himself a small smile. Miguel Morales was Dan's son, but Ray had been the one who helped the boy with calculus and physics throughout high school. Kid was always smart, just needed someone to push him. Dan nodded, studying his coffee. He says the tutoring you gave him put him ahead of half his class. A pause. That's some advanced math. For a bartender, Ray shrugged. Picked it up here and there. Dan let it go, as he always did when Ray deflected questions about his past. They'd developed this dance over the years. Dan's casual probing, Ray's vague answers. An unspoken understanding existed between them. Dan knew Ray wasn't just a bartender. And Ray knew Dan knew, but neither pressed too hard. Anyways, Dan continued, thought you should know. Alejandro Vega's men were asking questions about property values yesterday. Specifically about this stretch of road. Ray's hands stilled momentarily. Alejandro Vega was the head of the Sangre, Nueva Cartel's Texas operations, running everything from drugs to human trafficking across a 100-mile stretch of border. His organization had been pushing north in recent years, buying up land and businesses, establishing legitimate fronts. This place isn't for sale, Ray said simply. Didn't think it was. Dan finished his coffee. Just giving you a heads up, Vega doesn't usually take no for an answer. After Dan left, Ray locked the front door and moved to the back office. The small room was spartanly furnished, a metal desk, filing cabinet, and a single chair. He pulled a key from around his neck and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside was a false bottom, which he removed to reveal a secure satellite phone, one that hadn't been activated in years. Ray stared at it, but didn't pick it up. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out the weathered photograph of Elena that Hay kept beside it. She was laughing in the picture, her dark hair blowing across her face on the day they'd first opened El Coyote. Still keeping my promise, he whispered to the photo. Still, just Ray the bartender. A knock at the back door interrupted his thoughts. Ray quickly secured the hidden compartment and moved through the storeroom. Through the peephole, he saw Lucia, Mendez, shifting nervously from foot to foot. At 26, Lucia was Eleanor's niece and the closest thing to family Ray had left. She worked as a nurse at the county clinic and volunteered as a community health worker in the colonias, the unincorporated settlements that dotted the border. Elena had practically raised her after Lucia's mother fled to escape an abusive husband. Ray opened the door. Thought you were on shift today. I am. I'm on break. Lucia's eyes were rimmed with red, her normally neat ponytail disheveled. Can I come in? In the kitchen, Ray poured her a glass of water, noting her trembling hands. What happened? They brought in 3 girls last night, she said softly. Youngest couldn't have been more than 15. They'd been kept in a storage container for days, dehydrated, signs of assault. She looked up at Ray. Vega's people dropped them off at the clinic when they got too sick to transport north. Ray's expression darkened. Did they say that? That they were Vega's? They didn't have to. I recognized one of them. Felix Ordóñez. He used to date my friend Carmen. Lucia's voice hardened. He was wearing a gold watch that probably cost more than I make in 3 months. Did you tell the sheriff? Lucia gave him a look. Ray, everyone knows Vega has people in the sheriff's department. Not Dan, but others. Nothing would happen except maybe I'd disappear next. Ray felt something cold settle in his stomach. What do you want me to do, Lucia? I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself. I just needed to tell someone I trust. Those girls, the things they described. She trailed off. Ray placed a hand on her shoulder, awkward in his attempt at comfort. Eleanor had been the one good with emotions. You did what you could, he said quietly. Did I? Lucia looked up at him with an intensity that reminded him of Elena. Sometimes I think there's more we should be doing. All of us. After Lucia left, Ray returned to the hidden compartment and stared at the satellite phone again. This time, he picked it up, weighing it in his hand. 7 years of silence. 7 years of being just Ray Salazar, the quiet bartender with the tragic past. 7 years of keeping his promise to Elena. He placed the phone back and closed the compartment. That evening, El Coyote saw its usual trickle of regulars. Javier and Thomas, ranch hands from the Martinez property, arguing good-naturedly about the Dallas Cowboys prospects. Robert Chen, who drove the El Paso-Laredo route, stopping for his usual meal of enchiladas before hitting the road again. Hector Delgado, retired Border Patrol, nursing the same glass of whiskey for hours while reading paperbacks with cracked spines. Ray moved through the evening with the same quiet efficiency he always did, serving drinks, preparing simple meals, occasionally joining in conversations, but mostly observing. The cantina felt like a ship anchored in time, unchanging while the world shifted around it. Just after 9, the door opened, and Ray immediately registered the strangers, 3 men, in business casual attire that didn't quite fit the setting. The leader, a tall man with a closely trimmed beard and sunglasses despite the hour, approached the bar while his companions took a corner table. Whiskey, neat, the man said, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes that assessed everything. Exits, patrons, the layout of the bar, professional eyes Ray recognized, having seen them in mirrors throughout his former life. You're a long way from anywhere, Ray commented, pouring the drink. The man smiled slightly. Just passing through. Heard this place has character. Ray set the glass down. Not much of that left around here. I wouldn't say that. The man took a sip, appraising Ray over the rim of his glass. This building, for instance. 1940s construction. Load-bearing walls reinforced sometime in the 80s. Good sightlines to the road. Defensible position. His smile widened at Ray's carefully neutral expression. I have an interest in architecture. Ray wiped down the counter. Enjoy your drink, Mr. Mitchell. John Mitchell. The man extended his hand. And you must be Ray Salazar. Ray hesitated, before shaking the offered hand, feeling calluses that didn't come from office work. Bar's got my name on the license. Mitchell nodded, then glanced around the cantina again. Nice quiet town you've got here. Shame about the development plans. Ray's eyes narrowed slightly. What development plans? The highway project. Word is, it's going to cut right through this area, bring a lot of changes. Mitchell finished his whiskey. Some people might see opportunity there, others, complications. I'm just a bartender, Ray said evenly. Politics isn't my concern. Mitchell laughed softly. Of course. He placed a business card on the counter. If you ever decide you'd like to sell, my associates are interested in properties along the projected route. We pay very well. Ray didn't touch the card. Place isn't for sale. Mitchell studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, but keep the card. Situations change. He placed his sunglasses. You never know when you might need new options, Mr. Salazar. Or should I say, Ray is fine. Ray cut him off, voice dropping slightly. Mitchell smiled. Ray it is then. He rejoined his companions, who finished their drinks quickly before all 3 departed. As the door closed behind them, Hector approached the bar. Friends of yours? Ray shook his head, slipping Mitchell's card into his pocket. Just passing through. Later that night, after closing, Ray sat alone in the darkened cantina. The encounter with Mitchell had left him uneasy. The man's references to the building's defensive features and the careful way he'd almost used a different name for Ray suggested knowledge he shouldn't have. Either Mitchell was agency, still active or former, or he worked for someone with access to classified files. Either way, it meant Ray's carefully constructed anonymity was compromised. He moved to the back office and retrieved the satellite phone. Again. This time, he activated it. The device powered up with a soft glow, connecting to a network few civilians knew existed. Ray's finger hovered over the keypad. Calling would mean acknowledging the past he'd left behind, opening a door he'd sworn to keep closed for Elena's sake. It would mean admitting he was still Specter, the operative who had moved through shadows for 20 years, eliminating threats with clinical precision. In the end, he powered down the phone without making the call. Tomorrow, he decided, he would drive to Laredo and make inquiries through old channels about Mitchell and what interest the agency might have in a forgotten border town, the highway project, Vega's increasing presence. Now agency personnel showing up at his bar, the thread swear connecting in ways Ray didn't like. Before leaving, he checked the security systems installed throughout the building. Cameras, motion sensors, reinforced entry points, all hidden behind the cantina's weathered exterior. Satisfied, he locked up and walked to his modest house a quarter-mile down the road. Under the vast Texas sky filled with stars, Ray Salazar tried to convince himself he was still just a bartender, while the instincts of Specter catalogued every unusual vehicle along the road, every sudden movement in the shadows, every potential threat to the quiet life he'd promised Elena he would maintain. Promises, he thought grimly, were becoming harder to keep. 3 days after John Mitchell's visit, Ray drove his weathered Ford pickup along the dusty road to Laredo. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the scrubland, the radio tuned to a staticky country station more for company than entertainment. The satellite phone lay on the passenger seat, still powered down. Laredo had changed since Ray had last visited 6 months ago. New construction dotted the outskirts, franchise restaurants and big box stores creeping closer to the border like an invasion force of capitalism. The city had always been a gateway to Mexico, to opportunity, to trouble, but now it seemed to be swelling, stretching, its concrete fingers out toward forgotten places like San Ignacio. Ray parked downtown near a coffee shop called Frontera Brews. The place was unremarkable: exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, college students typing on laptops. Except for one detail, it was owned by Gabriel Torres, former DEA special agent, and one of the few people who knew Ray's real identity. Gabriel was behind the counter, grey streaking his black hair, his broad shoulders slightly stooped now. At 55, he looked older than Ray, despite being 2 years younger. The badge had aged him, then retirement had softened him. When he spotted Ray, surprise flashed across his face before he masked it with a casual smile. "The coffee in San Ignacio must be terrible if you drove all this way," Gabriel said, reaching across the counter to shake Ray's hand. His grip was firm, eyes searching Ray's face. "Usual," Ray nodded. "And a few minutes of your time." They sat at a corner table, positioned so they both could watch the door. Old habits neither man questioned. 7 years of silence, and suddenly you're sitting in my cafe," Gabriel said quietly. "Should I be worried?" Ray sipped his black coffee. "Had a visitor, name of John Mitchell, said he's interested in buying property along the new highway route." Gabriel's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. "Tall guy, trimmed beard, moves like he's cataloguing threats." "That's him." Gabriel leaned back, tapping his fingers against his cup. "Not agency, at least not anymore. Word is he consults for private interests now. Security firms, multinational corporations, occasionally less reputable clients. He knew things he shouldn't. About you?" Gabriel raised an eyebrow, almost slipped and called me something other than Ray. Gabriel cursed softly. "Files got digitized 3 years ago. Security protocols were supposed to be ironclad, but..." He shrugged. "Nothing stays buried forever, my friend." What would he want with land in San Ignacio? The highway project is real. Federal funding, fast-tracked approvals. Someone's greasing wheels to make it happen. Gabriel pulled out his phone, showed Ray a map. "The new route creates a direct line from Laredo to El Paso, bypassing checkpoints on the current highways. It'll cut through 50 miles of barely patrolled land. Ray understood immediately. Perfect for moving product or people. Exactly. And your cantina sits at what will become a strategic crossroads. Gabriel studied him. You're not the only one. Getting offers. Every property owner along that stretch is being approached. Some with money, others with threats. Vega, Ray said grimly. Gabriel nodded. Sangre Nueva has been expanding. But they're not the only players. Mitchell represents Operative Consortium. Chinese investors on paper, but rumor says it's Russian money behind it. They've been buying infrastructure near borders across the southwest. Funneling what? Everything. Drugs, weapons, technology, people. Vega's watching his territory get encroached on, fighting back hard. Gabriel leaned forward. 2 of his lieutenants were found last week. Professional hits, military precision. Ray kept his expression neutral. Cartel wars happen. This was different. Gabriel lowered his voice further. No signature, no message. Just efficient elimination, like something you might have done in your previous line of work. The implication hung between them. I'm retired, Ray said flatly. Are you? Gabriel's gaze was penetrating. Because there are whispers, Ray. People from the old life asking questions about a certain operative, about whether he's truly off the board. Ray's jaw tightened. I made a promise. To Elena. Gabriel's expression softened slightly. I know, and I'm sorry to be the one telling you this, but promises don't mean much to the people looking for you, or to the people you used to work for. What are you saying? I'm saying the agency's internal security has been conducting a review of all former deep cover operatives. Something about potential information exposure. Gabriel looked around the cafe before continuing. Assets SARE being evaluated as either still valuable or potential liabilities. The words settled like a weight on Ray's chest. In agency terminology, liabilities were neutralized, not retired. I've been quiet for 7 years, Ray said. Living in the middle of nowhere, running a bar that barely breaks even. How am I a threat to anyone? Because you know things, Ray. Operations in places Americans weren't supposed to be. Methods that would make congressional committees blanch. And now the borders are heating up again, new players moving in, and suddenly you're sitting at the crossroads of a very valuable transport route. Gabriel spread his hands. Coincidence makes people nervous. Ray absorbed this, mind already calculating. Implications, potential threats, escape routes. The operational thinking he'd tried to suppress for 7 years flowing back with disturbing ease. You think Mitchell was assessing me? He stated. I think someone's trying to figure out if Ray Salazar the bartender is still Specter the operative. And whether you're an asset or a problem. Gabriel pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. You should know what you're dealing with. Ray pocketed the drive. You're still plugged in. Retirement gets boring. Gabriel attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And old friends disappearing permanently tends to motivate a man to stay informed. As Ray stood to leave, Gabriel caught his arm. One more thing. There's a new control officer running border operations out of San Antonio, codename Artemis. Young, ambitious, effective. Started asking about old assets in the region 3 months ago. Around when the highway project was approved, Ray noted. Exactly. Gabriel's expression was grim. Watch yourself, Ray. The world we knew is changing. New rules, new players, but the same old dirty games. On the drive back to San Ignacio, Ray pulled over at a scenic overlook, one of those forgotten spaces where tourists once stopped to photograph the expansive border landscape. Now it was just another decaying piece of infrastructure. The parking lot cracked, informational signs faded and bullet-pocked. He connected the thumb drive to his laptop, using security protocols that felt as familiar as breathing despite years of disuse. The files were comprehensive. Satellite imagery of San Ignacio and the surrounding area, property records, geological surveys related to the highway project. But what caught his attention were the personnel files. Dossiers on cartel members operating in the region, but also on law enforcement, local officials, and business owners, including himself. The file was sparse compared to what he knew existed, in agency databases, but concerning nonetheless. It contained his cover identity details, property ownership, and a relationship map connecting him to various people in San Ignacio. Most troubling was a section labeled Anomalies that noted inconsistencies in his background story and suspicious security features identified at El Coyote Cantina. The final page was a simple assessment. Subject displays operational awareness and defensive positioning consistent with specialized training. Recommend further investigation and potential recruitment neutralization based on alignment with Project Crossroads. Ray closed the laptop, mind racing. Project Crossroads. The name confirmed his suspicions that the highway development was more than infrastructure improvement. It had all the hallmarks of an agency front operation, likely aimed at controlling or monitoring cross-border traffic under the guise of economic development. And he was sitting right in the middle of it. As Ray pulled back onto the highway, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Lucia's number. Ray. Her voice was tight with anxiety. Where are you? Driving back from Laredo. What's wrong? There are men at the clinic. They've closed it down, claiming there's a public health inspection, but they're not from the health department. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They're asking about the girls from last week, the trafficking victims. They took our files. Ray's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Where are you now? In the supply closet. Dr. Hernandez told me to hide. When they started asking specifically about me, stay there. Don't come out until I call you back. Ray accelerated, mind shifting fully into operational mode. Do not go home. Do not call anyone else. Ray, you're scaring me. Good. Fear keeps you alive. The words came automatically, Specter's voice rather than Ray's. I'll call you in 30 minutes with instructions. Ray ended the call and immediately dialed Sheriff Morales. Dan, it's Ray. There's a situation at the clinic. Armed men posing as health inspectors. Jesus, Ray, slow down. What are you talking about? Lucia called me. Men came to the clinic asking about the trafficking victims from last week and took patient files. They're looking for her specifically. Dan's voice turned serious. I'll head over there now. No. Ray's tone stopped Dan cold. If these are Vegas, men, you'll be walking into an ambush. Meet me at El Coyote in 20 minutes. Come through the back. Ray, I'm the sheriff. I can't just... 20 minutes, Dan. Trust me on this. Ray ended the call before Dan could argue further. As he sped towards San Ignacio, Ray's mind catalogued resources, threats, and contingencies with cold efficiency. The satellite phone on the passenger seat seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile. Using it would alert the agency to his active status, potentially flagging him in systems watching for former operatives going back online. But Lucia was family. Not by blood, but by his promise to Elena. Keep her safe. Elena had made him swear as the cancer took her final strength. She's all alone in this world. Ray pressed harder on the accelerator, the truck's engine protesting as dust billowed behind him on the empty road. When Ray arrived at El Coyote, he didn't immediately go inside. Instead, he circled the property, checking for surveillance or unfamiliar vehicles. Satisfied it was clear, he entered through a cellar door hidden beneath a weathered loading dock at the rear of the building. The basement of El Coyote was not on any building plans filed with the county. Ray had constructed it himself over the course of a year, working nights, bringing in materials gradually to avoid notice. Eleanor had thought he was being paranoid. Old habits, she'd said with a sad smile. Now, as he activated the security system, that would alert him to any approach within 100 yards, Ray was grimly grateful for those habits. The room contained everything a man with his background might need if his past caught up with him. Weapons, cash in various currencies, medical supplies, communications equipment, and multiple sets of identification, documents, a go bag ready for immediate departure, the tools of a life he'd promised to abandon. Ray changed quickly into black tactical pants and a dark shirt, strapping on a shoulder holster and checking the Beretta before securing it. He was loading spare magazines when he heard the proximity alert. A vehicle approaching from the main road. The security monitor showed Sheriff Morales' patrol SUV pulling behind the cantina. Ray buzzed him in through the back door. Dan stopped, short when he entered the basement, taking in the arsenal and equipment with widening eyes. What the hell, Ray? No time to explain everything, Ray said, continuing his preparations. What matters now is getting Lucia safely out of the clinic and figuring out why Vega's men are suddenly acting so boldly in broad daylight. How do you know it's Vega? Dan asked, still staring at the room's contents. Educated guess. The timing's too perfect. 3 days after I refused to sell to Mitchell, Vega makes a move against the one person I care about. Ray looked up from checking a combat knife. But that's not what you're really asking, is it? Dan gestured around the room. What is all this? Who are you, really? Right now, I'm someone trying to help Lucia. Ray handed Dan a secure radio. You can decide if you want answers to those other questions later. Dan took the radio, jaw tight. If Lucia's in danger, I'm helping. But afterward, we're having a long conversation. Fair enough. Ray activated a laptop, bringing up satellite imagery of the clinic. The county health clinic Hastwu exits. Main entrance in front, service door in back. Standard procedure for a professional team would be to cover both exits while sweeping the interior. Professional team? Dan repeated. These are just cartel thugs. Ray shook his head. Vega's regular muscle wouldn't pose as health inspectors or specifically target patient files. This is a precision operation. He pointed to the screen. 3 vehicles parked outside. That suggests at least 6 men, potentially more inside. Dan ran a hand over his face. Ray, I've got 2 deputies on duty today, both rookies. County tactical response is an hour away minimum. We're outgunned. We don't need a tactical team. Ray continued gathering equipment. We need a distraction. And an extraction plan. And what happens when they come back with more men? Or when they target someone else in town? Dan's voice rose. This isn't just about Lucia. This is my town, goddammit. Ray stopped, turning to face Dan fully. Something in his expression made the sheriff take an involuntary step back. One problem at a time, Ray said quietly. First we get Lucia safe. Then we deal with Vega. How exactly are we going to do that? You're going to create a distraction. Official sheriff business, loud and visible at the front entrance. Draw their attention. Make them think it's just routine law enforcement checking on a report. Ray outlined the plan. While you keep them occupied, I'll enter through the rear, locate Lucia, and get her out. And if they start shooting? Ray's eyes were cold. Then I'll finish it. Dan stared at him. You're not just some ex-military guy who opened a bar, are you? No. Ray checked his watch. We need to move. Lucia's been hiding for almost 30 minutes now. As they prepared to leave, Dan grabbed Ray's arm. These men, if they work for Vega, killing them will start a war. The war's already started, Ray replied. They just fired the first shot. They took separate vehicles, Dan in his sheriff's SUV, Ray in a nondescript Jeep he kept garaged behind El Coyote. As they drove, Ray felt the familiar calm settling over him, the operational focus that had kept him alive through decades of missions. Part of him recognized he should be disturbed by how easily he slipped back into this mindset, how natural it felt after years of suppression. Another part, the part Elena had always feared, welcomed it like coming home. The county health clinic was a single-story building on the edge of town, surrounded by a half-empty parking lot. As they approached, Ray noted the 3 black SUVs parked near the entrance, confirming his assessment. Through binoculars, he spotted a man in a suit standing by the main doors, hands suspiciously positioned under his jacket, armed security posing as a health official. Remember, Ray said over the radio as Dan prepared to approach from the main road. Your job is distraction only. Do not enter the building unless I give the all clear. Copy that. Dan's voice was tense but professional. Just get her out. Safely, Ray. Ray positioned himself at the rear of the building, using the cover of a dumpster enclosure. From this vantage point, he could see the service entrance and a section of the parking lot. A second guard stood by the back door, smoking and checking his phone periodically. Sloppy procedure that confirmed these weren't agency contractors. Dan's patrol car pulled up to the front with lights flashing but no siren. Through his earpiece, Ray could hear the sheriff's amplified voice announcing a routine security check due to reports of suspicious activity. The guard at the rear straightened, putting away his phone and touching his earpiece, receiving instructions from inside. It was the opening Ray needed. Moving silently across the pavement, he approached from the guard's blind spot. The man sensed movement too late, turning just as Ray's hand clamped over his mouth, the other driving a knife precisely between ribs and into the heart. A quick, clean kill with minimal sound, muscle memory. Ray had hoped never to use again. He caught the body before it fell, dragging it behind the dumpster enclosure before retrieving the guard's radio and weapon. The earpiece was active with Spanish chatter, 3 men inside, agitated about the sheriff's arrival, another man watching from a vehicle across the street. Ray entered through the service door, moving through the back hallway with practiced silence. The clinic was small, an L-shaped main corridor with exam rooms, a lab, supply closets, and administrative offices. From his position, he could hear raised voices from the front reception area. Dan engaging with someone, maintaining the distraction. "We have proper authorization," a man was saying, accent suggesting northern Mexico. "This is a public health compliance check." "Then you won't mind waiting while I verify that with the state office," Dan replied, his voice deliberately measured. "Strange that I wasn't notified of this inspection." Ray moved deeper into the clinic, checking rooms systematically. The building appeared empty of regular staff, likely sent home when the false inspection began. In the administrative office, file cabinets stood open, folders scattered across desks. They'd been searching records, just as Lucia had said. A noise from the hallway froze Ray in place, boots on linoleum moving his direction. 2 sets, moving with purpose. "Check the supply closets again," a voice ordered in Spanish. "The nurse has to be here somewhere." Ray flattened himself against the wall, beside the door, knife ready. As the first man entered, Ray struck, a hand over the mouth, blade across the throat in one fluid motion. He lowered the body silently to the floor. As the second man called out, "Marco, encontraste algo?" When no answer came, the second man approached, cautiously, gun drawn. Ray waited until he crossed the threshold, then struck again. This time a precise blow to the brainstem with the knife handle, followed by a killing stroke when the man collapsed. 2 down, 1 inside, 1 in the vehicle outside. Ray keyed his radio. "Dan, keep them talking. 2 targets neutralized, still searching for Lucia." Dan didn't respond verbally, but Ray heard him through the building, voice rising slightly as he continued questioning the remaining man's credentials. The final supply closet was in the rear hallway near the lab. Ray tapped gently on the door. "Lucia, it's Ray." No response. "Elena's favorite song was Saber and Me," he said softly. A detail only Lucia would know was true. The door cracked open, revealing Lucia's terrified face. "Ray, what's happening?" "No time. We need to move." Ray checked the hallway. "Stay behind." "Me, do exactly as I say," she nodded, eyes widening at the sight of the gun in his hand but asking no questions. As they moved toward the service entrance, Ray's earpiece crackled with sudden urgent Spanish. The man in the vehicle had spotted Dan's prolonged distraction and was alerting the leader inside. "Change of plans," Ray muttered, directing Lucia into an exam room. "We need to go out the front, but there are men." "I know, trust me." Ray keyed his radio. "Dan, situation compromised. Moving to plan B. On my mark, draw your weapon and take cover." Through the earpiece, Ray heard the rising tension at the front desk. The leader was becoming agitated, demanding to continue his inspection. "Now," Ray transmitted. Through the crack in the exam room door, he saw Dan suddenly step back, drawing his service weapon. "Sir, put your hands where I can see them." The distraction was momentary but sufficient. Ray pushed Lucia low and moved quickly down the hallway toward reception, hugging the wall. As he rounded the corner, he saw Dan crouched behind a reception desk, exchanging fire with the inspector, who had taken cover behind an overturned table. Moving with practiced precision, Ray fired twice. The first shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him. The second hit center mass as he turned, dropping him instantly. "Clear," Ray called. "Dan, watch the parking lot. 4th target is in a vehicle across the street." As if on cue, an engine roared to life. Through the clinic windows, Ray saw one of the black SUVs accelerating out of the parking lot. "Let him go," Ray said, as Dan moved to pursue. "We need to get Lucia out of here now." Dan stared at the 3 dead bodies, face pale beneath his tan. "Jesus Christ, Ray." Questions later, Ray reminded him, guiding a shaking Lucia toward the exit. "We need to move before reinforcements arrive." Outside, Ray scanned the area for additional threats before hurrying Lucia to his jeep. "Get in, stay down." Dan approached, holstering his weapon. "What now?" "Take your cruiser back to the station. Report an attempted break-in at the clinic that you interrupted. Unknown." Suspects fled the scene. Ray's voice was cold, operational. "I'll handle the rest." "Handle it how? There are 3 dead bodies in there, which will be gone in 20 minutes. Ray's tone left no room for argument. "Do you want to explain to the state police why there are professional killers posing as health inspectors in your county? Or why they were targeting Lucia specifically?" Dan looked between Ray and Lucia, jaw working as he processed the implications. Finally, he nodded. 24 hours. Then I need answers, Ray. All of them. You'll get them. Ray started the jeep. 4. Now act normal. I'll contact you when Lucia is secure. As they pulled away, Lucia finally found her voice. Ray, those men. You killed them like it was nothing. She was trembling, shock setting in. Who are you? Ray kept his eyes on the road, checking mirrors for pursuit. Someone who made a promise to keep you safe. Those men were looking for me specifically. They knew I treated those girls. Her voice cracked. What did I do? You witnessed something they want to keep hidden. Ray took a sharp turn onto a dirt road, heading away from town. The question is, what exactly those girls knew or saw that makes them worth killing over? Lucia's eyes widened. The tattoos. What tattoos? The girls all had small tattoos on their wrists. Numbers, like some kind of inventory system. Lucia wrapped her arms around herself. But one of them also had a different mark. A symbol one. Of the men noticed while I was treating her. That's when they took her away separately. Said she needed special treatment. I never saw her again. Ray's mind raced, connecting pieces. What was the symbol? A crescent moon with 3 stars. Lucia frowned. The girl said it meant she was special merchandise for important clients. Ray felt a cold wave of recognition. The symbol Lucia described was one he'd seen before, in classified briefings about a human trafficking network with connections to diplomatic and intelligence circles, a network the agency had allegedly dismantled 5 years ago. The gravity of the situation suddenly became clear. If that network was operational again, with connections to Vega's cartel and possibly the mysterious investors behind the highway project, then what had seemed like local corruption was potentially something far more dangerous. And by killing those men, Ray had just announced his presence to whoever was running the operation. The secure satellite phone in his pocket seemed to grow heavier. Using it now would mean fully stepping back into the world he'd left behind. Acknowledging to the agency that Specter was active again, but not using it might leave them vulnerable against what was clearly a well-organized and far-reaching threat. As Ray drove deeper into the desert scrubland, heading toward a safe house only he knew existed, he made his decision. Lucia's safety came first. Elena would have wanted that above all else. The promise of a normal life would have to wait. The safe house wasn't much to look at. A small adobe structure 20 miles outside San Ignacio, nestled against a rocky hillside that provided natural surveillance advantages. To casual observers, it appeared abandoned, another forgotten relic from a failed ranching venture. Ray had purchased it through a shell corporation 5 years ago, one of several contingency preparations Eleanor had gently mocked but never truly objected to. Always planning escape routes, she'd said once, smoothing his furrowed brow with tender fingers. Someday, you'll realize no one's chasing you anymore. She'd been wrong. Ray secured the perimeter while Lucia sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Shock had given way to a detached calm that concerned him more than tears would have. This place, she finally said, looking around at the sparse furnishings and reinforced windows. Insurance, Ray replied, checking that the satellite uplink was operational. For situations exactly like this one, normal bartenders don't have secret hideouts with military-grade security systems. Her voice was steady, eyes fixing on his with Eleanor's same unflinching directness. Or kill 3 armed men without breaking a sweat. Ray sat across from her, weighing how much to reveal. The operational handbook would dictate minimal disclosure, need-to-know basis only, even for family. But this wasn't an operation. This was Lucia, the closest thing he had to family, now in danger because of connections she couldn't possibly understand. Before I came to San Ignacio, before I met your aunt, I worked for the government. Ray kept his voice neutral. In capacities that required certain skills, you were a spy, not a question. Ray almost smiled at the simplification. Intelligence operative, among other things. Doing what, exactly? Things necessary for national security. The practiced non-answer came automatically. Lucia pushed away her tea. Don't insult me, Ray. Those men were going to kill me. I deserve the truth. She was right. Ray exhaled slowly, choosing his words with care. I worked primarily in counter-terrorism and narcotics interdiction operations, specialized in deep cover assignments in hostile territories, the kind of work that doesn't officially exist. You killed people. Yes. The simple admission hung between them. Lucia didn't flinch. And now those skills are keeping us alive, she said finally. So I guess I should be grateful instead of horrified. You can be both, Ray said quietly. I was, for a long time. Lucia studied him with new eyes. Did Eleanor know what you were? Everything. Ray's gaze drifted to the window, to the distant horizon. She's the reason I left that life behind. Made me promise to be just Ray Salazar, bartender. No more violence. No more death. Until today. Until today, he agreed grimly. Lucia was silent for a long moment. Those girls I treated. They're part of something bigger than Vega's usual trafficking, aren't they? Ray nodded. The symbol you described is associated with an exclusive network that caters to wealthy and powerful clients. People whose appetites are specific and who can pay for absolute discretion. Politicians, businessmen, among others. Ray didn't elaborate on what the intelligence community knew about certain diplomats, military officials, and even agency personnel who had been implicated in the network's client list. 5 years ago, a joint task force supposedly dismantled the entire operation. Arrests were made, evidence secured, but it's back, or it never truly went away. Ray stood, checking the satellite phone signal. The question is, who's running it now, and what connection it has to the highway project and the land acquisitions? What are you going to do? Ray weighed the satellite phone in his hand. Using it would alert the agency to his active status. Not using it might leave them vulnerable against what was clearly a sophisticated network. First, get you somewhere truly safe. Ray made his decision. Then find out exactly what we're dealing with. He powered up the satellite phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a computerized voice requested an authentication code. Ray provided a string of numbers and letters, followed by his operative designation. Identity confirmed, the voice stated. Routing. There was a long pause, longer than protocol dictated, before a live voice came on the line. This channel has been decommissioned. Female, precise diction. A hint of southern accent, carefully minimized. Please verify alpha sequence. Ray provided another code, one that indicated he was calling under duress. Standard procedure would be to acknowledge, gather information, and dispatch an extraction team. Instead, the woman's voice remained cool. Understood. Verification period initiated. Maintain current position. The line went dead. Ray stared at the phone, a chill settling in his stomach. Verification period wasn't standard protocol for an asset calling the emergency line. It suggested uncertainty about his status, or worse, suspicion. What's wrong? Lucia asked, reading his expression. Change of plans. Ray pocketed the phone and moved to a locked cabinet. We're not getting help from official channels, at least not yet. He retrieved 2 go bags containing cash, alternate identification documents, and essential supplies. We need to move. This location could be compromised. Where are we going? To see an old colleague. Ray checked his watch. Someone who might have a better picture of what's happening. As they prepared to leave, Lucia paused. Ray, the symbol I told you about. The girl with the special tattoo. She said something else I didn't mention. Ray turned to her, alert. She said her final destination was a place called Olympus, that only the specially selected were sent there. Lucia wrapped her arms around herself. The way she said it. It wasn't a good place, Ray. Olympus. The codename sent another chill through him. Years ago, in a classified briefing, there had been rumors of a high-end facility catering to elite clients with particular tastes. Nothing had ever been proven, and the investigation had been abruptly reassigned to another division. Ray's jaw tightened. We're going to find her, Lucia. All of them. As they drove away from the safe house, Ray noticed a drone in the distant sky. Small, nearly imperceptible, but definitely there. Military grade, not commercial. Someone with significant resources was already tracking them. Specter's instincts told him to evade, to disappear into pre-arranged escape routes. Ray Salazar's conscience reminded him that running wouldn't save the girls Lucia had treated, or stop whatever operation was unfolding in San Ignacio. He chose a middle path, engaging counter-surveillance measures while maintaining their course toward Del Rio, where a former colleague named Cassandra Way had established herself after leaving the agency under unclear circumstances. If anyone could make sense of the current operational landscape, it would be Cassandra, the woman who had trained Ray in deep cover techniques 20 years ago. The Texas landscape blurred as Ray pushed the Jeep to its limits, stealing glances at Lucia beside him. She stared straight ahead, face set in determination rather than fear. In that moment, she looked so much like Eleanor that Ray felt a physical ache in his chest. "I never properly thanked you," Lucia said suddenly. "For what?" "Saving my life." She turned to him. "I know what it cost you to break your promise to Eleanor." Ray kept his eyes on the road. She would have understood. Family comes first. Is that what I am? Family? Eleanor thought so. Ray's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And that's good enough for me." Lucia fell silent again, processing all she'd learned about the man she'd known for years, but never truly known at all. Miles behind them, in the desert safe house, the satellite phone Ray had discarded after removing its battery began to emit a faint signal, one that wasn't possible with the power disconnected, a beacon, activating on a specific frequency used only by agency tracking systems. The hunt for Specter had officially begun. Cassandra Way lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Del Rio, the property surrounded by a meticulously maintained garden that seemed at odds with the desert landscape. At 62, she had the erect posture and watchful eyes of someone who had spent decades in the field. Her black hair was now streaked with silver, her face lined but striking in its angular intensity. She opened her door before Ray could knock, eyes narrowing at the sight of him standing there with Lucia. 7 years of silence, and now you appear on my doorstep. Her voice held traces of her Hong Kong origins, despite decades in America. With a guess, no less. Your operational discipline has deteriorated, Specter. Hello to you too, Cassandra. Ray didn't bother explaining how he'd used 3 different vehicles and various counter-surveillance techniques to ensure they weren't followed. She would have expected nothing less. Cassandra's gaze shifted to Lucia, assessing. "Elena's niece. The resemblance is striking." She stepped aside. "You'd better come in before my neighbors start wondering why I'm entertaining visitors at 3 in the morning." Inside, the house was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with framed botanical illustrations the only decoration. Cassandra led them to a kitchen where tea was already brewing. "You knew we were coming," Ray observed. "I know when someone breaches my perimeter sensors." Cassandra poured 3 cups of tea. "And I still maintain certain information channels. Your call on the emergency line triggered several alerts." Ray tensed. "What kind of alerts?" "The concerning kind." Cassandra sat across from them, posture perfect. "Specifically, an asset verification protocol. It's only used when an operative's status is questionable." "Meaning what exactly?" Lucia asked. Cassandra studied her with renewed interest. "Meaning, young lady, that someone in the agency isn't certain whether Ray should be welcomed back or eliminated." "That's insane," Lucia protested. "He was one of them." "All the more reason to be cautious." Cassandra sipped her tea. "Those who know the most secrets pose the greatest potential risk." Ray leaned forward. "I need to know what's happening, Cassandra." "San Ignacio, the highway project, a trafficking network using the old Olympus protocols. And why my status is suddenly in question after 7 quiet years." Cassandra's eyes sharpened at the mention of Olympus. "You've stumbled into something complicated, old friend." "Explain." She rose, moving to a bookshelf that slid aside to reveal a secure room filled with communications equipment. Some conversations require proper privacy. Inside the room, Cassandra activated a signal jammer before turning to a computer terminal. 3 years ago, the agency underwent significant internal restructuring. New leadership, new priorities. Many older operations were re-evaluated. "Internal security review," Ray said, remembering Gabriel's warning. "More than that. A purge of what the new director called Cold War methodologies. Certain types of operations, the kind you and I specialized in, fell out of favor. Too messy, too deniable, too many potential blowback scenarios." Cassandra's fingers moved across the keyboard, bringing up classified documents that shouldn't have been accessible to a retired operative. Many of our colleagues were formally transitioned to advisory roles. Others were encouraged to retire completely. And some, Cassandra's expression darkened. 16 former deep-cover operatives have died in the past 2 years. Accidents, health issues, apparent suicides, all with one common factor. They knew about operations that violated official parameters, Ray guessed. Precisely. Operations like Obsidian Crescent. Ray stiffened. That was before my time. But not mine. Cassandra pulled up a heavily redacted file. 1994 to 2001. Officially, a counter-narcotics operation in Southeast Asia. Unofficially, it included facilitating certain recreational activities for foreign officials to ensure their cooperation, activities involving trafficked women. Lucia made a small sound of disgust. Indeed, young lady, Cassandra agreed. Not our finest hour as an agency. The operation was eventually shut down, all records supposedly destroyed. But methodologies established during Obsidian Crescent resurfaced in private enterprises, including the network that used the Olympus designation, which was allegedly dismantled 5 years ago, Ray said. So the official story goes. Cassandra pulled up satellite images of what appeared to be a private compound in northern Mexico. Reality suggests otherwise. This facility, located 50 miles south of the border, has shown patterns consistent with trafficking operations. High security, regular transport of individuals, exclusive client visits. Ray studied the images. Agency surveillance? Independent. Cassandra's smile was thin. I maintain certain extracurricular monitoring capabilities. You think this is Olympus? One iteration of it. The network appears to operate on a cell structure, with processing centers and final destinations kept separate. Cassandra brought up another image. This one showing a stretch of borderland that included San Ignacio. Your little town has suddenly become very interesting to several powerful entities. The highway project, Ray murmured. A perfect corridor for moving product, human or otherwise, with minimal official oversight. Cassandra highlighted several land parcels. These properties have been acquired by shell companies in the past 6 months, all connected to either Vega's organization or a multinational consortium with Russian financing. Mitchell's group, Ray said. Cassandra nodded. John Mitchell, former agency tactical, separated under classified circumstances in 2018, now works as a security consultant with some questionable clients. He approached me about selling El Coyote. Your property sits at what will become a key interchange. Cassandra zoomed in on the map. Ideal location for monitoring traffic or controlling it. Who's running this operation? Ray asked. Vega doesn't have the sophistication for something at this scale, and why would the agency suddenly be interested in my status? Cassandra hesitated, something unusual for her. That's where things become complicated. She pulled upon final document, an operational directive with recent date stamps. 3 months ago, a new border security initiative was launched. Codenamed Cerberus. Officially, it's a multi-agency effort to counter trafficking and narcotics smuggling. Unofficially, she let Ray read the document himself. The language was bureaucratic, but the implications clear. Cerberus authorized cooperative engagement with regional security assets and leveraging existing infrastructure to monitor and manage cross-border movements. In agency terminology, it was authorization to work with cartel elements deemed controllable to manage what crossed the border, rather than stopping it entirely. They're not fighting the traffickers, Ray said, disgust evident in his voice. They're partnering with them to control the trade. While gathering intelligence on the clients, Cassandra confirmed, many of whom have diplomatic or political value. That's evil, Lucia whispered. Those girls are people, not bargaining chips. Welcome to the real world of intelligence operations, my dear. Cassandra's voice held no apology. Moral compromise in service of perceived greater goods. Who authorized this? Ray demanded. Operation is compartmentalized, but it appears to run through a control officer codenamed Artemis. Ray remembered Gabriel's warning about the ambitious new officer asking about old assets. And my status? Cassandra's expression turned grim. Your emergency call triggered an immediate location trace. The protocol indicates you're to be brought in for comprehensive debriefing. Whether you leave that debriefing alive depends on what you know about Olympus and whether you're deemed cooperative. So I'm a potential liability. With your background and proximity to a key Cerberus location? Absolutely. Cassandra closed the files. The question is, what do you intend to do with this information? Ray glanced at Lucia, whose face showed a mixture of horror and determination. Those girls need help, she said firmly. And if our government won't provide it, someone else has to. For a moment, Ray saw Elena in her expression. The same fierce compassion, the same unwavering moral certainty. She's right, he said quietly. Whatever justifications they're using, trafficking innocent people can't be the cost of doing business. Cassandra studied him. The Ray Salazar I trained wouldn't have hesitated to follow operational directives, regardless of moral implications. That man died when he met Elena. Ray's voice hardened. I can't go back to who I was, but I can use what I know to stop this. You against an agency-sanctioned operation with cartel enforcement and private military contractors. Cassandra shook her head. Even Specter had limits. I'm not going against the agency. I'm going against corrupt elements within it. Ray leaned forward. You said yourself this isn't official policy. It's compartmentalized, deniable, which means exposing it to the right people could shut it down. Assuming you live long enough to make that exposure. Cassandra's expression softened slightly. Elena wouldn't want you sacrificing yourself, even for a just cause. Elena would be the first one fighting for these girls, Lucia interjected. And Ray knows it. Cassandra regarded them both for a long moment before sighing. You always were my most stubborn student. She turned back to her computer. If you're determined to do this, you'll need resources, and a plant that doesn't end with your death. For the next 2 hours, they outlined strategy. Cassandra provided access codes to secure communication systems, identities that wouldn't trigger agency alerts, and intelligence on Vega's organization and Mitchell's security contractors. By dawn, they had the beginnings of an operational framework. Your first priority should be gathering concrete evidence of the Cerberus Olympus connection, Cassandra advised. Without it, you're just another rogue operative making wild accusations. The trafficking victims Lucia treated could provide testimony, Ray suggested. If you can find them, Cassandra cautioned. And if they're still alive. Lucia's face paled, but she maintained her composure. The girl with the special tattoo, the crescent moon and stars, mentioned other girls being processed at a ranch near Piedras Negra before being sent to Olympus. Cassandra brought up satellite imagery of the area. Several properties match potential staging locations. Thisson, she highlighted, a compound 20 miles south of the border, shows regular vehicle movement consistent with transport operations. That's our first target then, Ray decided. Reconnaissance only. We need to confirm it's part of the network before taking any action. And if it is? Lucia asked. Ray met her gaze steadily. Then we document everything and find a way to get the girls out. There's one more thing you should know, Cassandra said as they prepared to leave. Your former handler, Thomas Keller, is still active with the agency, senior leadership position now. Ray paused. Keller had recruited him, trained him, guided him through his most difficult operations. They'd saved each other's lives multiple times. If anyone within the system might help, it would be Keller. Can he be trusted? Cassandra's expression was unreadable. He signed the Cerberus authorization. The news hit Ray like a physical blow. Keller had always operated in grey areas, but he'd maintained certain lines he wouldn't cross. Had power changed him, or had Ray never truly known the man? There's a secure Dropbox protocol still active between us, Ray said finally. If I needed to contact him, without going through official channels. Use it cautiously, Cassandra warned. The man you knew may not exist anymore. As dawn broke over the horizon, Ray and Lucia prepared to leave. Cassandra provided them with a new vehicle, a nondescript SUV with diplomatic plates that would reduce the likelihood of police interference. One last thing, she said, handing Ray a small metal case. Prototype communications equipment, untraceable by current agency systems. It should give you some operational advantage. Ray took the case, recognizing it as a significant gesture of support from his former mentor. Why are you helping us, Cassandra? This puts you at risk too. She looked away toward the rising sun. I've spent 40 years serving a system I believed in, compromising when necessary for what I thought was the greater good. But there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, even in our world. Her eyes, when they met his, held a resolve he remembered from his training days. Perhaps it's time I balance the scales somewhat. As they drove away, Lucia finally asked the question that had been building since their arrival at Cassandra's house. Can we really do this? Against the cartel, these contractors, and your own former agency? Ray considered the question seriously. The odds were overwhelming, the dangers extreme. By agency tactical assessment standards, the mission would be classified as high risk with minimal chance of success. But he thought of the girls Lucia had treated, of the victims still waiting for rescue, of Elena's conviction that everyone deserved protection from predators, no matter how powerful those predators might be. We can try, he said simply. And sometimes that's enough to change the equation. As they crossed into Mexico using identification papers Cassandra had provided, neither noticed the surveillance drone that briefly appeared on their horizon before disappearing into the clouds, or the encoded transmission it sent to a secure facility in San Antonio, where a woman codenamed Artemis reviewed the footage with growing interest. Subject is moving as predicted, she informed someone on a secure line. Operation Spearfish is proceeding to Phase 2. On her monitor, facial recognition software confirmed the identities of both Ray Salazar and Lucia Mendez as they crossed the border, heading deeper into a trap that had been months in the making. The ranch near Piedras Negra looked innocent enough from a distance, weathered buildings arranged around a central courtyard, cattle grazing in adjacent fields, workers moving about in patterns consistent with agricultural operations. Only careful observation revealed the anomalies. Perimeter security too sophisticated for livestock protection, regular vehicle movements at unusual hours, and a communication array disguised as farm equipment. Ray and Lucia observed from a ridge, 3 miles away, using high-powered optics Cassandra had provided. They'd been watching for nearly 6 hours, documenting activity patterns and security rotations. 4 guards visible at any time, Ray noted, making annotations on a tablet. 2 at the main entrance, 2 patrolling the perimeter. Shift changes every 4 hours. What about inside the main building? Lucia asked, her medical training evident in how quickly she'd adapted to surveillance techniques. Heat signatures suggest approximately 20 individuals. Based on movement patterns, I'd estimate 12 are security personnel, the rest potential captives. Ray adjusted the thermal imaging device. They're being kept in what appears to be a converted barn on the east side. Lucia's jaw tightened. So this is definitely a trafficking operation. All indicators point that way. Ray continued documenting security vulnerabilities. The question is how it connects to Cerberus and who's actually running it. Their surveillance was interrupted by Ray's secure phone vibrating. The caller ID showed a numeric code rather than a name, the protocol Cassandra had established for emergency communications. Situation compromised, Cassandra said without preamble when Ray answered. My systems detected intrusion attempts an hour ago. Sophisticated, agency level. You need to change locations immediately. Ray tensed. How did they find you? I have my suspicions. Cassandra's voice was clipped. Historical connection to you for one, but it's also possible my monitoring of certain agency communications drew attention. Regardless, you must assume all information I provided is potentially compromised, including our current operation. Especially that. Cassandra's voice dropped, lower. Ray, there's something else. I've been reviewing archival footage of San Ignacio from the past month. The timing of events, Mitchell's approach, Vega's escalation, even the trafficking victims arriving at Lucia's clinic. It all follows a pattern consistent with a controlled operation. Meaning, I think you were deliberately maneuvered into reactivating. The incidents were staged to ensure maximum pressure on precisely the moral and emotional triggers that would force you back into operational status. The implications settled like ice in Ray's stomach. Why would they want that? I don't know yet, but be extremely cautious. This may be more complex than either of us initially. Her voice cut off abruptly. Cassandra? Ray prompted sharply. When no response came, he tried again on alternate frequencies. Nothing. What happened? Lucia asked, reading his expression. We've lost contact, and possibly operational security. Ray began quickly packing their surveillance equipment. We need to move. Now. They retreated to their vehicle, concealed in a dry creek, bed a mile away. Ray's mind raced through implications of Cassandra's warning. If she was right, Every action he'd taken since Mitchell's visit to the cantina might have been anticipated, perhaps even engineered. What does this mean for the operation? Lucia asked as they drove away from the surveillance position. It means we need to reassess. Ray took a winding route back toward the border, using rural roads to avoid potential checkpoints. If we're being manipulated, we need to understand why before making any major moves. But what about the girls? If that ranch is holding trafficking victims, we'll find a way to help them, but rushing in without understanding the full picture could make things worse. Ray checked his mirrors for signs of pursuit. First priority is securing our position and communications. They crossed back into Texas at a small border crossing where Cassandra's credentials ensured minimal scrutiny. By late afternoon, they had reached a motel in Eagle Pass, anonymous enough for temporary refuge while they regrouped. In their room, Ray established secure communications protocols while Lucia reviewed the surveillance data they'd gathered. The guard rotations are precise, she noted, studying the tablet. Military precision, not cartel. Private contractors, most likely. Ray finished sweeping the room for surveillance devices. Probably the same group Mitchell represents. So what's our next move? Ray considered their options. Direct action against the ranch was too risky without better intelligence and support. Approaching official channels was equally dangerous given the apparent agency involvement in Cerberus. We need leverage, he decided. And more information about who's really running this operation. His secure phone vibrated again, this time with a text message from an unidentified source. The content was simple: coordinates, a time, and the phrase, "Regarding Olympus, could be a trap," Lucia pointed out when he showed her the message. Almost certainly is. Ray's expression was grim. But it's also our only current lead. The coordinates led to an abandoned gas station 30 miles west of Eagle Pass, remote enough for privacy, open enough to spot an ambush. Ray approached with extreme caution, positioning Lucia at a safe distance, with communications equipment and emergency protocols established. As he pulled up to the derelict building, he noted a single vehicle already present. A black sedan with tinted windows. Government issue, but without official markings. Ray parked at a calculated distance, maintaining sight lines to all potential threat vectors. A man emerged from the sedan, mid-50s, military bearing, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite disguise the shoulder holster beneath. Ray recognized him immediately. "Hello, Specter," Thomas Keller said, using the old designation with a slight smile. "Or do you prefer Ray these days?" Ray maintained his distance, hand near his concealed weapon. "Depends on why you're here, Tom." Keller gestured to the dilapidated gas station. "Shall we?" "I promise this location is secure. No teams, no surveillance beyond my own protective detail." He nodded toward a hillside where, Ray now noticed, a sniper position was subtly indicated by a flashing reflection. One man, considerate of you. "I remember your capabilities." Keller's smile faded. "And I'm here to talk, not engage." Inside the dusty interior of the former convenience store, they stood facing each other across what had once been the cashier's counter. 20 years of shared history hung between them. Operations in Afghanistan, Colombia, Yemen. Moments where each had trusted the other with his life. "I understand you've been asking questions about Cerberus," Keller began without preamble. "And Olympus." Ray watched for reactions. "Interesting projects for the agency to be involved with." "The world has changed, Ray. Threats are more complex, objectives more nuanced." Keller maintained perfect composure. "Sometimes managing problems is more effective than eliminating them. Is that what we're calling human trafficking now? A problem to manage?" Keller sighed. "You always did have a talent for moral absolutism when it suited you. Convenient, considering some of the operations we ran together." "I never targeted innocents." "No? What about Bogota in 2008? The banker's family?" Ray's jaw tightened. "Collateral. Damage in a legitimate terrorism interdiction. And how is that morally superior to what you think we're doing now? Sacrificing a few to protect many?" Keller's voice remained conversational, reasonable. "The trafficking networks exist whether we're involved or not. By maintaining certain connections, we gather intelligence that prevents worse atrocities." "Bullshit." Ray's voice hardened. "You're facilitating it, not monitoring it. The ranch near Piedras Negras has agency fingerprints all over its security protocols." Keller didn't deny it. "Consider the intelligence value. These networks serve clients with Significant geopolitical influence. The compromat alone has prevented 3 major security breaches in the past year. At the cost of how many lives? Fewer than would be lost if certain operations went unchecked. Keller spread his hands. This is the reality of the world we work in, Ray. You knew that once. I knew we had lines we wouldn't cross. And you think I've crossed them? Keller studied him. Perhaps I have, but not in the way you imagine. Hare moved a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the counter. This contains operational details of Cerberus that even Cassandra Way couldn't access. Ray didn't touch it. Why would you give me this? Because Cerberus has been compromised. Keller's expression turned grim. What began as a controlled monitoring operation has evolved into something else. Private interests have infiltrated the command structure. The trafficking network is no longer just an intelligence source. It's becoming a power center in its own right, with tendrils in our political and military establishment. Ray processed this, hearing the ring of truth in Keller's words despite his distrust. And Artemis? A complication. Keller chose his words carefully. Agent Diane Mercer, brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely convinced that the ends justify any means. She's advanced Cerberus beyond its original parameters, developing independent funding streams and operational autonomy. You've lost control of your own operation. I never said it was my operation. Keller's eyes held Ray's. But yes, certain elements within the agency have lost control of Cerberus, which is why I reached out when I learned you were asking questions. You want me to do your dirty work. Ray's laugh was without humor. Clean up your mess while maintaining plausible deniability. I want you to do what you do best, operate in shadows where official action can't reach. Keller nodded toward the flash drive. That contains everything you need to locate and identify the key nodes of the Olympus network, including client lists and financial structures. Take it down, expose it properly, and the political fallout will force a full shutdown of Cerberus, while you remain safely insulated, while preventing a national security catastrophe. Keller's voice carried genuine urgency now. This isn't just about trafficking, Ray. The network has begun acquiring influence at levels that threaten fundamental institutions. Ray studied his former handler, looking for signs of deception. Keller had always been exceptional at operational manipulation, constructing scenarios where assets believed they were acting independently while actually serving carefully designed objectives. Hello, Specter, Thomas Keller said, using the old designation with a slight smile. Or do you prefer Ray these days? Ray maintained his distance, hand near his concealed weapon. Depends on why you're here, Tom. Keller gestured to the dilapidated gas station. Shall we? I promise this location is secure. No teams, no surveillance beyond my own protective detail. He nodded toward a hillside where, Ray now noticed, a sniper position was subtly indicated by a flashing reflection. One man. Considerate of you. I remember your capabilities. Keller's smile faded. And I'm here to talk, not engage. Inside the dusty interior of the former convenience store, they stood facing each other across what had once been the cashier's counter. 20 years of shared history hung between them. Operations in Afghanistan, Colombia, Yemen. Moments where each had trusted the other with his life. I understand you've been asking questions about Cerberus, Keller began without preamble, and Olympus. Ray watched for reactions. Interesting projects for the agency to be involved with. The world has changed, Ray. Threats are more complex, objectives more nuanced. Keller maintained perfect composure. Sometimes managing problems is more effective than eliminating them. Is that what we're calling human trafficking now? A problem to manage? Keller sighed. You always did have a talent for moral absolutism when it suited you. Convenient, considering some of the operations we ran together. I never targeted innocents. No. What about Bogota in 08, the banker's family? Ray's jaw tightened. Collateral. Damage in a legitimate terrorism interdiction. And how is that morally superior to what you think we're doing now? Sacrificing a few to protect many? Keller's voice remained conversational, reasonable. The trafficking networks exist whether we're involved or not. By maintaining certain connections, we gather intelligence that prevents worse atrocities. Bullshit. Ray's voice hardened. You're facilitating it, not monitoring it. The ranch near Piedras Negras has agency, fingerprints all over its security protocols. Keller didn't deny it. Consider the intelligence value. These networks serve clients with significant geopolitical influence. The compromat alone has prevented 3 major security breaches in the past year. At the cost of how many lives? Fewer than would be lost if certain operations went unchecked. Keller spread his hands. This is the reality of the world we work in, Ray. You knew that once. I knew we had lines we wouldn't cross, and you think I've crossed them. Keller studied him. Perhaps I have, but not in the way you imagine. He moved a flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the counter. This contains operational details of Cerberus that even Cassandra Way couldn't access. Ray didn't touch it. Why would you give me this? Because Cerberus has been compromised. Keller's expression turned grim. What began as a controlled monitoring operation has evolved into something else. Private interests have infiltrated the command structure. The trafficking network is no longer just an intelligence source. It's becoming a power center in its own right, with tendrils in our political and military establishment. Ray processed this, hearing the ring of truth in Keller's words despite his distrust. And Artemis, a complication. Keller chose his words carefully. Agent Diane Mercer, brilliant, ambitious, and absolutely convinced that the ends justify any means. She's advanced Cerberus beyond its original parameters, developing independent funding streams and operational autonomy. You've lost control of your own operation. I never said it was my operation. Keller's eyes held Ray's. But yes, certain elements within the agency have lost control of Cerberus, which is why I reached out when I learned you were asking questions. You want me to do your dirty work. Ray's laugh was without humor. Clean up your mess while maintaining plausible deniability. I want you to do what you do best. Operate in shadows where official action can't reach. Keller nodded toward the flash drive. That contains everything you need to locate and identify the key nodes of the Olympus network, including client lists and financial structures. Take it down, expose it properly, and the political fallout will force a full shutdown of Cerberus, while you remain safely insulated, while preventing a national security catastrophe. Keller's voice carried genuine urgency now. This isn't just about trafficking, Ray. The network has begun acquiring influence at levels that threaten fundamental institutions, and studied his former handler, looking for signs of deception. Keller had always been exceptional at operational manipulation, constructing scenarios where assets believed they were acting independently, while actually serving carefully designed objectives. Cerberus has evolved beyond its authorized parameters. Correction is required. Your agency, Ray realized, pieces connecting. Deep cover, monitoring Mercer's operation from within. A considerable simplification, but functionally accurate. She handed him a small device resembling a standard smartphone. Secure communication module, protocols for emergency contact embedded in the operating system. Ray examined the device without activating it. Why extract me? What's my role in your correction? Because Artemis was right about one thing. Your skills remain exceptional. Cassandra took another turn, moving deeper into remote terrain. And because you have personal motivation to dismantle their operation, Lucia, and the other victims. Cassandra glanced at him briefly. Elena changed you, Specter. Gave you something most operatives never develop. A moral core independent of operational directives. That makes you unpredictable to people like Mercer. And valuable to those of us concerned about Cerberus becoming a cancerous growth within the agency. They drove in silence for several miles, Ray processing implications and calculating probabilities. The escape had been too clean, too perfectly executed. Either Cassandra possessed extraordinary access within Mercer's operation, or, this is another test, he said suddenly. Mercer is allowing this to happen, monitoring my decisions, my adaptability. Cassandra's slight smile confirmed his suspicion. Very good, though I wouldn't say allowing. Rather, she hasn't anticipated all contingencies. The extraction is genuine. Her awareness of it is partial, meaning she knows someone within her organization has gone rogue. She doesn't yet know who. Cassandra's voice hardened. And she doesn't know about the insurance protocols I've implemented regarding Lucia Mendez's security. They reached a small airfield where a twin-engine plane waited, propellers already turning. This will take you to a secure location in New Mexico, Cassandra explained, stopping near the aircraft. From there, You'll receive additional instructions and resources. Ray didn't move toward the plane, not without knowing Lucia's exact location and condition. You'll be more effective operating from a position of security than charging into another trap. Cassandra's expression softened slightly. I give you my word, Specter. Lucia Mendez will remain unharmed as long as ascertained operational parameters are maintained. Your word hasn't precisely been reliable recently, Ray noted. Fair assessment. Cassandra reached into her jacket, extracting a small data drive. This contains location data, security protocols, and real-time monitoring access for the facility, where Lucia is being held. Not actionable independently, but sufficient to verify her status and plan eventual extraction. Ray took the drive, weighing trust against necessity. Operational reality dictated strategic retreat Andre grouping rather than emotional response. But something had fundamentally changed within him during his years as Ray Salazar, a recalibration of priorities that placed individual lives above abstract strategic objectives. I'm not playing anyone's game anymore, Cassandra, he said finally. Not yours, not Mercer's, not the agency's. I'm going to find Lucia, shut down this trafficking operation, and ensure those responsible face consequences. If that aligns with your objectives, good. If not, he left the implied threat hanging between them. Cassandra studied him with what might have been approval. You've grown beyond your training. Elena would be proud. She nodded toward the waiting aircraft. Go. Contact protocols are embedded in the device he gave you. When you're secure, we'll discuss next steps. As the plane lifted into the night sky, Ray examined the data drive and communication device, searching for tracking mechanisms or other security compromises. Finding none immediately evident, he allowed himself to consider the broader implications of Cassandra's intervention. If she was telling the truth about a faction within the agency opposing Cerberus, it suggested the possibility of institutional allies, resources and support beyond what he could access independently. But if this was another layer of Mercer's assessment program, engaging with Cassandra could further compromise his position. For now, the operational imperative remained clear, secure position, verify Lucia's status, gather resources, develop intelligence on the trafficking network. The moral imperative was equally clear. Dismantle the operation, free the victims, expose those responsible. The challenge would be aligning those imperatives without sacrificing either, a challenge that would require Specter's tactical precision and Ray Salazar's moral clarity working in concert rather than opposition. As the lights of civilization receded beneath the aircraft, Ray made a silent promise to Eleanor and to himself. This time, when the dust settled, Ray Salazar would remain intact. Not consumed by Specter's cold operational efficiency, not sacrificed to abstract notions of national security. This time, he would find a way to honor both his promises and his principles. The safe house in New Mexico was located on the outskirts of Las Cruces, a modest ranch home with reinforced security features, disguised as ordinary construction elements. Ray swept it for surveillance devices immediately upon arrival, finding none active but identifying several dormant systems integrated into the structure. Standard agency protocol, monitoring capabilities installed but not activated unless necessary. The fact that they remained dormant suggested Cassandra's extraction operation hadn't yet been compromised. Using secured equipment provided at the location, Ray examined the data drive. It contained encrypted files requiring authentication protocols. He recognized from his agency days specific keystroke patterns and timing sequences that served as biometric verification. Cassandra had clearly prepared this specifically for him. The files opened to reveal surveillance footage of a facility identified as Processing Center Delta. Clinical imagery showed a medical wing where approximately 20 women were being housed, in conditions resembling a secure hospital rather than a detention center. Among them was Lucia, her injuries consistent with what he'd observed during their meeting at Olympus Prime. Timestamp data confirmed the footage was current, updated hourly through a secure relay system. Ray found himself impressively Cassandra's operational thoroughness despite his lingering distrust of her motivations. Additional files provided schematics of the facility, security protocols, staff rotations, and transportation schedules. According to the data, merchandise transfers occurred every 72 hours, moving selected individuals from Processing Center Delta to various end destinations, including Olympus Prime. Most disturbing were medical files detailing processing, protocols for trafficking victims, health assessments, psychological profiling, and conditioning regimens designed to ensure compliance. The clinical language disguised fundamental brutality, systematic breaking of resistance through controlled trauma and chemical management. Ray felt cold fury building as he reviewed these documents. Whatever justifications Mercer employed about intelligence, value, and controlled environments, the reality documented in these files revealed the operation for what it truly was: systematized exploitation, hiding behind national security rhetoric. Using the secure communication device Cassandra had provided, Ray initiated contact using embedded protocols. After multiple security handshakes and verification sequences, a text interface activated. Status report requested appeared on the screen. Secure. Reviewing intelligence. Require additional resources and clarification of operational objectives. Ray responded. Resources en route. Sierra protocol activation required for full briefing. Ray recognized the reference. Sierra protocols were emergency communication systems used when standard channels were potentially compromised. They required physical presence at designated, secure locations. Time frame? He asked. Hours. Maintain current position until contact established. The connection terminated automatically, security measures erasing all trace of the exchange. Ray continued analyzing the intelligence files, building mental models of the trafficking operations structure, identifying vulnerabilities and potential intervention points. The pattern that emerged was disturbing in its sophistication. What had begun as a monitoring operation had evolved into a self-sustaining enterprise generating substantial resources. Financial data showed proceeds being channeled through complex networks of shell companies and offshore accounts, eventually funding black-budget operations outside congressional oversight. More concerning was evidence suggesting the operation had developed implicit protection from multiple agencies through strategic client management, providing services to individuals with sufficient authority to prevent investigation or exposure. The list of clients included names Ray recognized from national security circles, diplomatic corps, and corporate leadership, people with direct influence over policy, funding, and oversight mechanisms. As dawn broke over the New Mexico landscape, Ray recognized the true scale of what they were facing. This wasn't simply a rogue operation or corruption within one agency. It was systematic capture of critical security infrastructure through compromise and controlled leverage. The stakes had expanded far beyond rescuing Lucia or shutting down a trafficking network. The entire integrity of national security systems was potentially compromised. Ray was still processing these implications when the safe house security system alerted him to an approaching vehicle. The camera feed showed a nondescript delivery van stopping at the gate. The driver remained inside, while a single passenger exited, male, approximately Ray's age, moving with the measured precision of someone with tactical training. Ray activated property defensive systems before positioning himself with direct sightlines to all entry points, weapon ready. The visitor approached without attempting to disguise his movements, stopping at the front door and looking directly at the concealed camera. Authorization Sierra 7 Delta 9er, the man said clearly. Sundown sends regards. The authentication, code and reference to Cassandra's operational designation were correct. But Ray maintained tactical positioning as he remotely unlocked the door. The visitor entered slowly, hands visible, recognizing standard security protocols. Thomas Matthews, he introduced himself, remaining in the entry area. Former Marine Force Recon, current independent contractor for specialized security operations. Contractor for whom specifically? Ray asked, weapons still oriented on potential threat vectors. Matthews smiled slightly. Currently, for you, if you choose to accept the arrangement. Over the next hour, Matthews outlined a proposition that clarified Cassandra's reference to alternative protocols, a group within the intelligence community, operating without official sanction but with tacit approval from certain oversight entities, had been monitoring Project Cerberus since its inception, documenting escalating ethical breaches and security compromises. We're not officially sanctioned, Matthews explained, but we're not exactly rogue either. Think of us as an immune response to infection within the system. And your objective regarding Cerberus: complete dismantling, documentation of violations, controlled disclosure to appropriate oversight bodies, and protection of victims. Matthews spread his hands. Essentially what you already want to do, but with actual resources instead of just determination and impressive individual skills. Why not official channels? Congressional oversight committees, Inspector General. Because we don't know how far the compromise extends, Matthews interrupted. Cerberus began with proper authorization for intelligence gathering. Its evolution occurred through incremental expansions that created a network of complicity. People who approved each small step became invested in the operation's success and now find themselves unable to expose it without implicating themselves. Ray considered this. The pattern matched his own observations of how initial compromises in intelligence operations often led to expanding ethical boundaries, the frog in boiling water syndrome that had corrupted otherwise principled professionals throughout his career. And Cassandra's role? Deep cover within Mercer's operation. Originally, agency-sanctioned oversight that evolved into independent monitoring when official supervision was compromised. Matthews produced a secure tablet displaying operational credentials and mission parameters. She recruited me and others when it became clear internal correction was no longer possible. The documentation appeared legitimate, though Ray maintained healthy skepticism about its authenticity. In his experience, the most convincing deceptions contained substantial elements of truth. Your proposed operation? He asked, focusing on practical next steps rather than institutional questions. Matthews activated a tactical display showing multiple facilities connected to Cerberus operations, including Processing Center Delta, where Lucia was being held. Synchronized interdiction of 3 primary facilities, occurring simultaneously to prevent adaptive response. He highlighted targets on the map: Processing Center Delta, the Financial Operations Center in Laredo, and the primary client facility at Olympus Prime. Resources: 12 operators with specialized training, equipment for tactical intervention, evidence collection, and victim extraction. Support personnel for medical response and secure transportation. Matthews brought up personnel files for Ray's review, plus your expertise in countering agency-level security protocols. The operation was well conceived from a tactical perspective, addressing the network's distributed structure. But Ray identified immediate concerns. Mercer will have contingency protocols for exactly this scenario, he noted. Deadman switches, evidence destruction mechanisms, potential harm to victims if security is compromised. Which is why we need your direct experience with agency containment procedures, Matthews acknowledged. Our team has the tactical capabilities, but you understand the specific security architecture Mercer would employ. Ray studied the operational details, assessing probabilities of success against potential costs. The plan was viable with his input on agency countermeasures. But something still troubled him about the arrangement. What happens to the victims afterward, and the evidence collected? Victims receive medical care, psychological support, legal assistance, and relocation services as needed. Matthews seemed prepared for the question. Evidence is secured for controlled disclosure to specific oversight entities with demonstrated independence from compromise. And the operatives involved in Cerberus? Mercer, Mitchell, others directly responsible. Matthews hesitated fractionally. That's partially dependent on evolving factors. Some may face legal consequences if evidence permits prosecution without compromising classified information. Others may be handled through administrative channels. The diplomatic phrasing confirmed Ray's suspicion. There would be limits to accountability, compromises made to protect institutional integrity over perfect justice, the familiar pattern of intelligence community self-protection. Not good enough, Ray said flatly. Those directly responsible for establishing and operating this network need to face genuine consequences, not administrative retirement or lateral transfers. That's not always realistic given classification constraints and— Make it realistic, Ray interrupted. Or find someone else to help you take down Cerberus. The leverage was clear. They needed his expertise specifically because of his experience with agency containment protocols. Without his participation, their operation's probability of success decreased significantly. Matthews studied him thoughtfully. You've changed since your agency days. Reports indicated you used to accept operational necessity over ideal outcomes. I still accept necessary compromises, Ray clarified. But protecting people who systematically trafficked women under the guise of national security isn't a necessary compromise. It's institutional corruption. After further discussion, they reached an amended agreement. The operation would proceed with Ray's participation, and his condition that evidence collection would prioritize establishing direct culpability for key individuals, regardless of potential institutional embarrassment. There's one more thing you should know, Matthews said. as they finalized operational planning. Lucia Mendez isn't just being held as leverage against you. According to Cassandra's intelligence, she's been selected for transfer to Olympus Prime as special merchandise. Ray felt cold rage building. Explain. Her medical background makes her valuable beyond typical trafficking protocols. The facility requires medical personnel who can't simply return to normal society. They're cultivating her for staffing rather than client services. When is the transfer scheduled? 36 hours from now. Matthews brought up transportation details. Which means our timeline has accelerated. We move in 24 hours. The next day was consumed by intensive preparation. Matthews's team arrived in stages. Experienced operators with backgrounds in special forces, intelligence services, and specialized law enforcement units. Each had personal motivation for participating, often connected to investigating or exposing trafficking networks. None were currently affiliated with official agencies, operating instead through a complex private structure Cassandra had established. Ray worked with the team's technical specialists to develop countermeasures for specific agency security protocols, likely implemented at the target facilities. His expertise proved crucial in identifying vulnerabilities in otherwise formidable defensive systems. By nightfall, 3 strike teams had been organized, equipped, and briefed. Ray would lead the team targeting Processing Center Delta to ensure Lucia's extraction personally. Matthews would command the financial center operation, while a former Delta operator named Sanchez would handle the Olympus Prime facility. As final preparations were completed, Ray reviewed the intelligence on Processing Center Delta once more, focusing on potential complications and contingency planning. The facility's security was substantial but not impenetrable, designed to deter conventional law enforcement rather than a specialized tactical team. The greater concern was ensuring victim safety during the operation. According to Cassandra's intelligence, 23 women were currently held at the facility, all at various stages of processing for eventual placement. Extracting them safely while securing evidence and neutralizing security personnel would require precise coordination and timing. As Ray finalized tactical assignments, Matthews approached with updated intelligence from Cassandra. "We have a complication," he said, displaying new surveillance imagery. "Mercer has arrived at Processing Center Delta personally. She's accelerated Lucia's transfer schedule." Ray studied the footage showing Mercer's arrival with a security detail. "When?" "Transfer vehicle is being prepared now. Estimated departure in 3 hours." This changed everything. Their carefully planned simultaneous strike would need to be adjusted or abandoned entirely. Waiting for the original timeline would mean losing Lucia to Olympus Prime, where extraction would be significantly more difficult. "We move now," Ray decided. "My team will initiate early, focusing on intercepting the transfer. You and Sanchez maintain the original timeline for the other facilities. Splitting the operation increases risk substantially," Matthews warned. "If they realize one facility is under attack, they'll enhance security at the others. We have no choice." Ray was already moving toward the equipment room. If Lucia reaches Olympus Prime, her chances of successful extraction drop by approximately 60% based on facility security assessments. Matthews recognized the determination in Ray's expression and nodded. "Your call. I'll notify the teams of the adjustment." Within 30 minutes, Ray's strike team was mobilized. 6 operators with specialized training in covert facility infiltration and hostage extraction. They moved toward Processing Center Delta in 2 unmarked vehicles, maintaining separate approaches to reduce detection probability. Ray reviewed the final tactical plan as they drove. The facility was designed to appear as a private rehabilitation center, located on isolated property 30 miles from Del Rio. Perimeter security included motion sensors, cameras, and armed patrols. Internal security featured controlled access points, surveillance systems, and approximately 12 security personnel per shift. Their approach would use a maintenance access point identified in Cassandra's intelligence, a vulnerability in the otherwise comprehensive security system. Once inside, they would move in 2 elements. Team Alpha securing the control center to disable alarms and monitoring systems. Team Bravo locating and extracting Lucia and other victims. As they neared the facility, Ray activated secure communications and final equipment checks. The team was professional and focused, moving with the quiet efficiency of experienced operators. Despite years away from field operations, Ray felt the familiar operational focus returning. The heightened awareness and calculated precision that had made Specter so effective. The difference now was the purpose driving these skills. Not abstract, national security objectives or agency directives, but the concrete goal of rescuing specific individuals from demonstrable harm. The moral clarity of the mission created a focus he had rarely experienced in his former career. "Control, this is Specter," Ray transmitted as they reached their staging position. "In position and commencing infiltration. Radio discipline from this point forward." The maintenance access point was exactly where intelligence had indicated. AI, service entrance for utility workers with security measures focused on logging entry rather than preventing it. Using credentials Cassandra had provided, the team bypassed initial access controls and entered the facility's basement level. Moving in practiced formation, they advanced through maintenance corridors toward their primary objectives. Ray led Team Bravo, while his second-in-command, a former Navy SEAL identified only as Carson, commanded Team Alpha toward the Security Control Center. Synchronized takedowns of 2 patrol guards were executed silently, the unconscious men secured with restraints and concealed. So far, the operation was proceeding according to plan. No alarms, no indication their presence had been detected. Then everything changed. As Team Alpha approached the security center, an alarm activated. Not the expected facility alert, but a distinctive agency emergency protocol that Ray recognized immediately, not triggered by their presence, but by something else. "Change in status," came Carson's tense voice over the comm. "Control center showing evacuation protocol activated. They're moving all personnel and assets." Ray processed this development instantly. "Proceed to control center as planned. We need eyes on facility status." To his own team, he directed. "Double time to detention area. Evacuation means they're moving Luciano." They accelerated through the corridors, abandoning some stealth for speed. As they approached the medical wing where victims were housed, they encountered the first armed response. 2 security personnel escorting a doctor down the hallway. The engagement was brief and decisive. Non-lethal takedowns, as planned, to preserve potential witnesses and minimize operational complications. But the encounter confirmed the facility was in active evacuation mode. When they reached the detention area, they found most rooms already empty. Medical equipment still running, personal items scattered as evidence of hasty removal. Room by room, they cleared the wing until only 2 guarded rooms remained at the far end of the corridor. 2 targets, center of hallway, covering the last rooms, reported the team's point operator. "Armed and alert to presence. Flashbang, then advance," Ray ordered. "Non-lethal if possible, but security of victims takes priority." The tactical sequence executed perfectly. Disorientation devices followed by rapid neutralization of the guards. As the team secured the corridor, Ray moved to the first room, finding 3 women huddled in the corner, terrified but physically unharmed. "We're here to help," he assured them in Spanish, signaling the team medic to attend to them. "You're safe now." The second room contained a single occupant, Lucia Mendez. Unlike their projected meeting at Olympus Prime, this was unquestionably her. She lay on a hospital bed, medical restraints securing her limbs, an IV delivering what appeared to be sedatives. Her eyes opened groggily as Ray quickly removed the restraints and IV. "Ray?" she murmured, struggling to focus. "How?" "Explanations later," he said, checking her vital signs. "Can you walk?" She attempted to sit up, determination overriding sedation. With help, as the team medic stabilized her, Carson's voice came through the comm system. "Control center secured. We have facility cameras and systems. Evacuation protocol initiated 20 minutes ago. Transport vehicles departed carrying approximately 18 women. Mercer left in a separate vehicle with security detail." "Direction?" Ray demanded. "West Access Road, toward Olympus Prime according to facility transport logs." Ray made a rapid tactical assessment. They had secured Lucia and 3 other victims, but the majority had already been transported, likely alerted by some fail-safe mechanism Cassandra hadn't identified. "Status of other teams?" he asked. "Proceeding on original timeline," Carson reported. "No communication to maintain operational security." This created a critical decision point. The original plan called for extraction of secured victims to safe locations, followed by evidence collection and facility shutdown. But with the majority of victims en route to Olympus Prime, priorities had shifted. "We need to pursue the transport," Ray determined. "Those women are still in danger, and Mercer can't be allowed to escape." "High risk," Carson cautioned. Transport has head start and likely armed escort. Our primary objective was securing Lucia Mendez. Ray looked at Lucia, who had managed to sit up despite the sedatives still in her system. Her eyes, though clouded by drugs, held the same determination he'd seen throughout their ordeal. "We can't abandon them," she said, voice strengthening as her mind cleared. "You know what awaits them at Olympus Prime." The decision crystallized for Ray. Elena would have made the same choice, extending protection beyond immediate family to all victims of exploitation. It was the moral center she had helped him rediscover. "Team Alpha completes victim extraction according to original plan," he ordered. "Team Bravo pursues transport with me. Notify Matthews of change in operational parameters." Within minutes, they had reorganized. The 4 rescued women would be evacuated to the safe house with Team Alpha, while Ray led 3 operators in pursuit of the transport convoy. Before departing, he extracted critical evidence from the facility's systems: operational records, financial data, and surveillance footage, documenting the processing and transfer of trafficking victims. As they moved toward their vehicles, Lucia insisted on accompanying the pursuit team despite medical concerns. "I'm a nurse," she reminded Ray, moving with increasing steadiness as the sedatives metabolized. "Those women will need medical attention when you intercept the transport, and I can identify key personnel from the facility." Her logic was sound, though Ray recognized emotional motivation beneath the rational arguments. Like him, she couldn't abandon the other victims after coming this far. They departed in a modified tactical vehicle, following tracking data from the facility's transport management system. The convoy was approximately 30 minutes ahead, moving along isolated back roads toward the border crossing, where they would enter Mexico and proceed to Olympus Prime. "Pursuit parameters?" asked Rodriguez, a former Border Patrol tactical officer, now driving their vehicle. "Intercept before border crossing," Ray decided. Once they're in Mexico, complications multiply exponentially. The pursuit became a calculated race against time, balancing speed against tactical positioning. Ray communicated with Matthews, updating him on developments and coordinating adjusted operational timelines. The strike on the financial center would proceed as planned, while Sanchez's team at Olympus Prime would prepare for possible incoming transport. If intercept failed, Lucia, now almost fully recovered from sedation, studied facility records they'd extracted. "These women aren't just random trafficking victims," she noted, reviewing medical files. "They're selected for specific attributes: medical background, language skills, physical characteristics matching particular profiles. Targeted recruitment, rather than opportunistic trafficking," Ray confirmed. "The entire operation is more sophisticated than standard human trafficking networks, and more expensive to maintain," Lucia added, "which means the financial component is critical to dismantling the entire system." Ray finished her thought. Matthews's target may ultimately prove more important than direct interdiction. As they closed the distance to the transport convoy, satellite imagery provided by Matthews's support team showed 3 vehicles moving in close formation, 2 SUVs escorting a modified prisoner transport van. Their route appeared to be heading toward a private crossing point rather than official border checkpoints. "Intercept options?" Ray asked Rodriguez, who knew border terrain intimately. Rodriguez studied the map. "They're heading toward Domingo Crossing, privately owned land with access points on both sides. Minimal border patrol presence due to jurisdictional agreements with the landowner." He indicated a point on the map. "This stretch of road before the crossing is our best option. Isolated, limited escape routes, 2 miles from the border." Ray formulated the tactical approach. With only 4 operators against what intelligence suggested was a security team of at least 8, direct confrontation presented significant risks. Instead, he developed a rolling interdiction plan using terrain advantages and precision timing. "We'll establish a blocking position here," he indicated on the map. "Disable the lead vehicle, then target the driver of the transport. Once vehicles are immobilized, we secure the victims while maintaining defensive position against security personnel." The plan accounted for their numerical disadvantage by emphasizing positional advantage and initiative. If executed properly, it would create sufficient chaos to overcome superior numbers. Lucia prepared medical supplies for potential casualties, while Ray and the tactical team readied equipment for the interdiction. As they neared the intercept point, Rodriguez killed the vehicle's lights and navigated by night vision equipment, maintaining stealth approach. "Transport convoy 3 minutes from intercept point," reported their surveillance specialist, monitoring satellite feeds. Maintaining consistent speed and formation, they reached the planned position with moments to spare, establishing a concealed blocking formation using terrain features for cover. Ray positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the approaching convoy. Sniper rifle ready to disable the lead vehicle with precision fire to the engine block. As the convoy appeared on the dark road, headlights illuminating the desert landscape, Ray gave final instructions through the comm system. On my mark, initiate sequence. Priority is securing the transport and protecting victims. Use lethal force only if necessary. He settled into shooting position, breathing controlled, focus absolute. 3, 2, 1, execute. His first shot struck with surgical precision, disabling the lead SUV's engine. The convoy braked sharply as Rodriguez accelerated their vehicle into blocking position, cutting off retreat. The team's 2 other operators deployed, establishing a crossfire position covering the transport van. Security personnel reacted with professional speed, returning fire from defensive positions around the damaged vehicle. The engagement intensified as both sides maneuvered for tactical advantage. Ray maintained overwatch, neutralizing immediate threats to the team while monitoring the transport van. When the driver attempted to reverse and find an escape route, Ray's shot through the front tire ended the possibility. Transport immobilized, he reported. Moving to secure, the firefight continued as Ray and Rodriguez advanced toward the transport, using coordinated movement and cover fire to reach the vehicle. The rear security SUV's personnel had established defensive positions, their fire keeping the extraction team temporarily pinned down. Rodriguez deployed a smoke grenade, creating visual cover for their final approach to the transport. Reaching the driver's door, Ray found the man already wounded by earlier fire but still conscious. Keys, Ray demanded. When the man hesitated, Ray's expression hardened. Now, after securing the driver, Ray moved to the rear doors while Rodriguez provided cover. Inside, he found 18 women in various states of sedation, secured to bench seating along both walls. Their expressions registered confusion and fear rather than hope at the interruption of their journey. "We're here to help," Ray assured them in both Spanish and English. "Medical assistance is coming. You're safe now." As he began releasing their restraints, the tactical situation outside deteriorated. The security team had regrouped, implementing professional counter-ambush protocols that threatened to overwhelm the extraction team's position. "We need to move these women immediately," Ray informed Rodriguez. "Current position becoming untenable." Before they could implement evacuation, a new complication arose. A helicopter appeared on the horizon, approaching rapidly from the direction of the border. The aircraft's profile was military-grade, likely private security rather than official response. "Reinforcements incoming," warned their surveillance specialist. Estimated arrival 90 seconds. The tactical calculation shifted dramatically. Evacuating 18 semi-conscious women before the helicopter arrived was impossible. Maintaining their position against reinforced opposition would likely result in casualties on both sides. Ray made the difficult decision. Change in extraction plan. "Rodriguez, get Lucia and as many women as you can into our vehicle. I'll cover and create diversion." "Negative," Rodriguez objected. "We don't leave people behind." "Not asking." Ray's tone left no room for argument. "Primary mission is securing victims. I'll create opportunity and follow alternative extraction route." As Rodriguez reluctantly began moving women who could walk toward their vehicle, Ray prepared for the defensive action. The approaching helicopter complicated matters significantly, but also created a potential opportunity if he could commandeer it. Lucia appeared at his side, medical bag over her shoulder. "I'm staying to help with the women who can't be moved yet, Lucia." "This isn't negotiable, Ray." Her expression mirrored the determination he'd seen in Eleanor when her mind wasn't. "You need medical support for these women, and I'm not leaving them." The helicopter was nearly upon them, searchlight activating to illuminate the scene below. Ray made final tactical adjustments, positioning remaining team members to cover the initial evacuation while preparing for the helicopter's arrival. "If this goes wrong," he told Lucia, "find Matthews. He'll ensure you reach safety." "It won't go wrong," she replied with conviction, beyond the tactical realities they faced. "We've come too far." The helicopter descended approximately 200 yards from their position, disgorging tactical personnel who immediately moved to reinforce the security team. Ray prepared for intensified engagement, calculating ammunition against increased opposition. Then something unexpected happened. The newly arrived tactical team didn't advance toward the transport. Instead, they engaged the convoy's security personnel with precise fire. Through his scope, Ray observed the tactical team's distinctive movement patterns and equipment. Their agency, he realized with shock. Official tactical response, not Mercer's people. Before he could process this development, his secure communication device activated with emergency protocols. Cassandra's voice came through clearly despite the tactical chaos surrounding them. Specter, be advised. Official agency containment team on site. Operation Cerberus has been officially terminated by director authorization. Identify yourself to tactical team leader for secure extraction. Ray hesitated, years of operational caution making him suspicious of sudden reversals. Verification? Sierra Echo 9. 7-3. Cassandra provided the emergency authentication code. Sundown confirms Dawn protocol activation. The code was legitimate, impossible to fake without direct access to their secure communication systems. Something significant had changed at the highest levels of the agency. Ray transmitted on the emergency band used by agency tactical teams. This is Operative Designation Specter with Civilian Extraction Team. We have secured trafficking victims requiring medical attention. The response was immediate. Confirmed, Specter. Secure your position. Medical support inbound. The firefight ended as quickly as it had begun. Mercer security personnel surrendering or neutralized by the superior force. Agency tactical operators secured the area with professional efficiency, while medical personnel approached the transport. As the situation stabilized, a familiar figure emerged from the helicopter, Thomas Keller. You're a hard man to keep track of, Specter, he said as he approached Ray's position. Though I should have expected nothing less. Ray maintained tactical awareness, weapons still ready. What happened? Director learned the full extent of Cerberus yesterday. Operational authorization was immediately revoked. Keller surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. Apparently someone provided comprehensive evidence of ethical breaches and unauthorized expansions directly to oversight channels. Cassandra, Ray realized. Keller nodded. Working with elements inside and outside the agency. Your extraction from Olympus Prime was part of a coordinated exposure operation. He studied Ray thoughtfully. Though I suspect you accelerated certain timetables with your characteristic initiative. Ray didn't lower his weapon. And Mercer? Apprehended at secondary checkpoint attempting to cross into Mexico. Keller's expression was unreadable. Along with comprehensive evidence of financial operations and client relationships, which will be handled how exactly? Ray demanded. Remembering Matthews's diplomatic references to administrative consequences rather than genuine accountability. That, Keller said carefully, is currently the subject of intense discussion within oversight channels. The involvement of certain high-profile individuals creates complications. Not acceptable, Ray stated flatly, echoing his position with Matthews. Complete accountability, or I take what I know public. Keller's expression shifted to one Ray hadn't seen before. Something approaching respect mixed with resignation. You really have changed, he observed. Eleanor's influence, I imagine. Eleanor showed me there are lines that shouldn't be crossed, regardless of justification. Ray finally lowered his weapon as Lucia approached with one of the agency medical team. I'm holding to that standard now. Keller seemed to weigh his options before responding. I'll relay your position to the director. For what it's worth, I believe you'll find the official response more aligned with your expectations than you might anticipate. As agency personnel secured the scene and attended to the trafficking victims, Ray watched Lucia working alongside medical staff, her training and compassion evident despite her own recent trauma. Her resilience reminded him powerfully of Elena, the same core strength that had attracted him from their first meeting. Matthews approached, arriving with a secondary team that had been monitoring the operation from reserve positions. Interesting development, he commented, observing the agency's unexpected takeover. Cassandra's contingency planning was more comprehensive than she shared with us. She always maintained multiple operational layers, Ray acknowledged. Though, I suspect even she didn't anticipate this level of official response. What happens now? Matthews asked. To the women, to the evidence, to Mercer and her people? That, Ray said, is what will ensure happens properly. He turned to face Matthews fully. Your team still is independent evidence, correct? Separate from what Cassandra provided to the agency. Matthews nodded slowly, understanding Ray's thinking. Insurance against administrative solutions to criminal problems. Exactly. Ray watched as the rescued women were carefully transferred to medical transport vehicles. The agency needs to understand that proper resolution isn't optional this time. The stakes had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a personal mission to rescue Lucia and honor his promise to Eleanor had evolved into something larger, a chance to ensure accountability for systemic exploitation justified through national security rhetoric. Ray recognized that his unique position, neither fully inside nor outside the system, created leverage that could ensure proper resolution. The moral clarity Elena had helped him rediscover would serve as his compass through the complex institutional negotiations ahead. As dawn broke over the desert landscape, illuminating the aftermath of the night's operation, Ray made a silent commitment. This would end properly, with victims protected and those responsible held genuinely accountable. Not because it was operationally expedient or institutionally manageable, but because it was right. In that moment, he realized something profound. The integration he had been seeking between Specter's operational effectiveness and Ray Salazar's moral principles wasn't a compromise or balance. It was an evolution into something more complete than either identity alone could provide. Elena would have understood, and for the first time since her death, he felt certain she would be proud of the man he was becoming. 3 days after the raid, Ray sat in a sterile conference room at an agency facility in San Antonio. The air felt heavy with unspoken agendas, as Assistant Director Margaret Chen studied him from across the table. Thomas Keller sat beside her, his face unreadable. A third official, identified only as Representative Phillips, from the Inspector General's office, completed the panel. "Your account aligns with evidence recovered from the facilities," Chen said, tapping her tablet, "particularly concerning the financial structures and client relationships." Ray leaned forward. "Speaking of clients, has the decision been made regarding prosecution?" Phillips shifted uncomfortably. "That determination falls outside my direct authority. Evidence is being evaluated for appropriate action, considering national security implications." "Meaning political considerations will determine accountability," Ray translated flatly. "Meaning proper protocols must be followed," Chen corrected with practiced diplomacy. "This situation is complex. Let me simplify it," Ray said, his voice hardening. 23 women were being processed like products. 18 more were nearly transported to a facility where they would be exploited by people with power and influence. That's not complex. It's criminal. Keller intervened before Chen could respond. "The director shares your perspective, Specter, which is why Mercer and 17 members of her operational team are currently in custody facing serious charges." "And the clients? The people who created the demand?" The uncomfortable silence confirmed Ray's suspicion. Institutional self-preservation was already taking precedence over accountability. "Mr. Salazar," Phillips finally responded, using his civilian name pointedly. "Certain aspects of this investigation involve individuals with diplomatic immunity, or whose prosecution would require disclosing classified operations to public courts. Which is why we're exploring alternative accountability mechanisms," Chen added quickly, "including administrative actions, security clearance revocations, and diplomatic channels for foreign nationals involved." Ray had anticipated this response. The agency would sacrifice Mercer and her operational team while protecting higher-level participants through bureaucratic maneuvering. "Not sufficient," he stated simply. "I'm not sure you understand your position here," Phillips said, an edge entering his voice. "You're a former operative who engaged in unauthorized actions resulting in multiple fatalities. Your cooperation is being considered as a mitigating factor in determining your own legal status." Ray's expression remained calm, but something changed in his posture. A subtle shift that made both Chen and Phillips instinctively straighten in their chairs. "Let me clarify my position," Ray said, his voice carrying the quiet certainty that had once made Specter the agency's most effective operative. "I possess independently secured evidence documenting every aspect of Cerberus, including client identities, financial transactions, and operational authorizations. This evidence has been placed with multiple custodians under dead man protocols." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Meaning? Meaning if I don't periodically verify my continued freedom and well-being, that evidence becomes public through channels beyond agency influence. That would constitute a serious breach of national security," Phillips warned. So did authorizing the trafficking of women, Ray countered. I'm simply ensuring proper accountability occurs rather than institutional damage control. Keller broke the impasse. I believe we can establish an independent oversight committee with representative stakeholders, including the Inspector General's office, Congressional Intelligence Committee liaisons, and victim advocacy representatives. He looked to Chen. With your authorization, I can initiate those protocols immediately. After a tense silence, Chen nodded. Approved. But with the understanding that all evidence remains secured through appropriate channels. No independent releases, under any circumstances. Agreed, provided the Oversight Committee has genuine authority and transparency, Ray countered. And Lucia Mendez receives immunity from any potential legal complications arising from her involvement. That can be arranged, Chen confirmed. By the time they concluded, Ray had secured more concrete commitments than he had initially expected possible. As the meeting ended, Keller remained behind while Chen and Phillips departed with the documentation. That was quite a performance, he commented once they were alone, though I'm curious which parts were bluffs and which were genuine. Ray gathered his notes without responding. The independently secured evidence is real, I assume, Keller continued. Probably arranged through Cassandra's network. The multiple custodians might be exaggerated, but the dead man protocol is almost certainly in place. Ray finally looked up. Does it matter? The outcome is what counts. It matters because I'm trying to understand what you've become. Keller studied him with genuine curiosity. Inspector General's office completed the panel. Your account aligns with evidence recovered from the facilities, Chen said, tapping her tablet. Particularly concerning the financial structures and client relationships. Ray leaned forward. Speaking of clients, has the decision been made regarding prosecution? Phillips shifted uncomfortably. That determination falls outside my direct authority. Evidence is being evaluated for appropriate action, considering national security implications. Meaning political considerations will determine accountability, Ray translated flatly. Meaning proper protocols must be followed, Chen corrected with practiced diplomacy. This situation is complex. Let me simplify it, Ray said, his voice hardening. 23 women were being processed like products. 18 more were nearly transported to a facility where they would be exploited by people with power and influence. That's not complex. It's criminal. Keller intervened before Chen could respond. The director shares your perspective, Specter, which is why Mercer and 17 members of her operational team are currently in custody facing serious charges. And the clients? The people who created the demand? The uncomfortable silence confirmed Ray's suspicion. Institutional self-preservation was already taking precedence over accountability. Mr. Salazar, Phillips finally responded, using his civilian name pointedly. Certain aspects of this investigation involve individuals with diplomatic immunity, or whose prosecution would require disclosing classified operations to public courts. Which is why we're exploring alternative accountability mechanisms, Chen added quickly, including administrative actions, security clearance revocations, and diplomatic channels for foreign nationals involved. Ray had anticipated this response. The agency would sacrifice Mercer and her operational team while protecting higher-level participants through bureaucratic maneuvering. Not sufficient, he stated simply. I'm not sure you understand your position here, Phillips said, an edge entering his voice. You're a former operative who engaged in unauthorized actions resulting in multiple fatalities. Your cooperation is being considered as a mitigating factor in determining your own legal status. Ray's expression remained calm, but something changed in his posture. A subtle shift that made both Chen and Phillips instinctively straighten in their chairs. Let me clarify my position, Ray said, his voice carrying the quiet certainty that had once made Specter the agency's most effective operative. I possess independently secured evidence documenting every aspect of Cerberus, including client identities, financial transactions, and operational authorizations. This evidence has been placed with multiple custodians under dead man protocols. Chen's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Meaning if I don't periodically verify my continued freedom and well-being, that evidence becomes public through channels beyond agency influence. That would constitute a serious breach of national security, Phillips warned. So did authorizing the trafficking of women, Ray countered. I'm simply ensuring proper accountability occurs rather than institutional damage control. Keller broke the impasse. I believe we can establish an independent oversight committee with representative stakeholders, including the Inspector General's office, Congressional Intelligence Committee liaisons, and victim advocacy representatives. He looked to Chen. With your authorization, I can initiate those protocols immediately. After a tense silence, Chen nodded. Approved. But with the understanding that all evidence remains secured through appropriate channels. No independent releases, under any circumstances. Agreed, provided the Oversight Committee has genuine authority and transparency, Ray countered. And Lucia Mendez receives immunity from any potential legal complications arising from her involvement. That can be arranged, Chen confirmed. By the time they concluded, Ray had secured more concrete commitments than he had initially expected possible. As the meeting ended, Keller remained behind while Chen and Phillips departed with the documentation. That was quite a performance, he commented once they were alone, though I'm curious which parts were bluffs and which were genuine. Ray gathered his notes without responding. The independently secured evidence is real, I assume, Keller continued. Probably arranged through Cassandra's network. The multiple custodians might be exaggerated, but the dead man protocol is almost certainly in place. Ray finally looked up. Does it matter? The outcome is what counts. It matters because I'm trying to understand what you've become. Keller studied him with genuine curiosity. The Specter I knew would have accepted operational necessity, understood institutional constraints. The Specter you knew didn't question sufficient parameters, Ray corrected. That was the problem. Keller acknowledged this with a slight nod. Elena really did change you fundamentally. She helped me remember something I'd lost. Ray stood to leave. The difference between what's expedient and what's right. And now I finish what I started. Ray moved toward the door. Ensuring the victims are properly cared for, the system that exploited them is dismantled, and those responsible face appropriate consequences. Keller's expression turned serious. Be careful, old friend. You've made powerful enemies. Some of the people implicated have resources beyond agency protection, and Mercer still has loyalists within the system who believe Cerberus was justified. Ray found Lucia in a secure medical facility in Austin, where she continued working with trafficking victims despite her own recovery. Did you see the Oversight Committee's proposal? She asked when they were alone. Yes. It's better than expected, though still constrained by institutional considerations. Lucia studied patient files spread across her lap, medical assessments of trafficking victims rescued from the processing center. These women need more than just physical healing, Ray. They need justice. That's what I'm working toward. Ray checked his secure tablet. Though the system resists full accountability at every turn. Like Elena always said, systems protect themselves first, people second. Lucia's expression softened. She would be proud of what you're doing, you know. Before Ray could respond, his secure phone vibrated with an urgent alert from Matthews. We have a situation, Matthews reported when Ray answered. One of the victims from Olympus Prime has provided information about another facility. Apparently, there's an Olympus 2 on the Gulf Coast serving international clients. Estimated 8 to 10 women currently held there. Ray's focus immediately shifted to operational planning. Do we have location confirmation? Satellite imagery suggests a compound near Corpus Christi matches the description. Security features inconsistent with standard executive protection, movement patterns suggesting non-voluntary occupants. I'm on my way, Ray said, already calculating tactical requirements. Prepare for reconnaissance and potential extraction operation. Lucia caught his arm before he could leave. Ray, be careful. These people have already demonstrated they'll do anything to protect their operation. He nodded. Understanding her concern went beyond professional interest. I'll maintain appropriate security protocols. That's not what I meant, she said. Don't lose yourself in the mission. Elena wouldn't want you sacrificing your humanity, even for a just cause. The comment struck deeper than Lucia likely intended. Throughout his agency career, Ray had submerged his personal identity in service to operational objectives. Elena had pulled him back from that abyss, helping him rediscover the person behind the operative designation. I won't, he promised, meaning it. This isn't about becoming Specter again. It's about using those skills for the right purpose. 6 hours later, Ray stood with Matthews overlooking the coastal compound identified as Olympus 2. The facility, presented as a private wellness resort, with luxury accommodations disguised as health retreats. Only trained observation revealed the security features inconsistent with legitimate operations. One-way locks, inward-facing cameras, guard positioning designed to prevent escape rather than unauthorized entry. Approach options? Matthews asked, as they studied the compound through high-powered optics. Direct tactical intervention carries substantial risks, Ray noted. Civilian occupants create collateral damage potential. Security response time from nearby assets could compromise extraction. Timeline. Alternatives? Covert insertion disguised as legitimate service personnel. Limited team, focused on identification and extraction of trafficking victims rather than facility neutralization. Ray outlined his approach. We utilize contractor credentials to access the main facility, locate the women, and extract through Eastern Perimeter, where maritime team can provide extraction support. The plan prioritized victim safety over operational completeness, a balance Ray had come to value differently since his agency days. As they finalized preparations, Ray received unexpected communication from Keller. I've been monitoring your operational planning regarding the Corpus Christi facility, Keller began without preamble. The approach is tactically sound but understaffed considering security assessment. Resource constraints necessitate prioritization, Ray responded neutrally, which is why I've secured authorization for tactical support. Keller's expression remained professional, but something approximating genuine concern showed briefly. Maritime insertion team positioned for coordination with your operation. 6. Operators with specialized extraction training. Available on your command authorization. The offer represented institutional acknowledgement of the operation's legitimacy and priority status. Authorization parameters? Ray inquired, assessing potential constraints. Full operational autonomy under your tactical command. No reporting. Requirements beyond basic outcome notification. No attribution or official acknowledgement. Keller's expression hardened slightly. The director wants this resolved cleanly and completely. The Oversight Committee is applying significant pressure following your negotiations. Ray accepted the support, recognizing the tactical advantages outweighed potential institutional complications. With the expanded resources, they refined their approach. Ray's team would focus on identifying and securing the women, while the maritime team established extraction capabilities. The operation proceeded smoothly at first. They entered the compound through main security using contractor credentials, located the restricted residential section, and identified 7 women being held against their will, despite the luxury accommodations. We're here to extract you safely, Ray explained as they approached the women. U.S. government rescue operation. You're being taken to a secure facility where you'll receive appropriate care and protection. The extraction was proceeding according to plan when they encountered a security supervisor. Matthews neutralized him efficiently, but the encounter accelerated their timeline as his absence would eventually trigger security protocols. They reached the extraction point without further security encounters. The maritime team waited with extraction, craft, low-profile vessels designed for quiet operation. The women boarded quickly, and Ray performed a final verification scan before departing. As the vessels departed the private shoreline, maintaining stealth approach to minimize detection probability, Ray experienced a particular satisfaction he had rarely felt during agency operations: the clear knowledge that specific individuals had been rescued from concrete harm rather than abstract strategic objectives achieved at potential human cost. They transferred the women to a larger agency vessel offshore, which would transport them to the secure medical facility where Lucia waited to assist with their integration and recovery. Only after confirming successful extraction did Ray implement secondary operational components, documentation transmission, and evidence preservation. As their aircraft returned to San Antonio, Ray received priority communication from Cassandra, her expression reflecting unusual urgency. "We have a situation developing," she reported without preamble. "Mercer has escaped again." The news landed with critical implications. A second escape suggested systematic security compromise and institutional penetration at levels previously unidentified. "How?" Ray demanded, immediately calculating security implications for witnesses and evidence. Medical transport between facilities. Similar pattern to previous escape. Targeted neutralization of security personnel. Evidence of internal assistance. Precision execution suggesting professional tactical support. Status of witness security. Enhanced protocols implemented immediately. All facilities locked down. Communication blackout. Security details doubled. Cassandra's expression remained grave. However, preliminary assessment suggests Mercer had access to classified data regarding security arrangements before her escape. Ray's jaw tightened. Specific threats to Lucia or other primary witnesses? Pattern analysis suggests Mercer will prioritize elimination of key witnesses before attempting to leave jurisdiction. Cassandra's assessment was clinical, but clearly concerned. Lucia Mendez represents particularly high-value target, given her direct knowledge and current role supporting victim recovery and testimony preparation. I'm redirecting to the witness protection facility, Ray decided immediately. Matthews will complete evidence processing while I implement personal security assessment. The aircraft diverted to a military airfield near the protection facility, where Lucia and other key witnesses were housed. Ray conducted personal assessment of security measures, finding the physical security comprehensive, but the personnel security potentially vulnerable. Too many individuals with access authorization and insufficiently compartmentalized protocols. What's your recommendation? Lucia asked when he explained his concerns. Relocation of key witnesses to separate facility with minimal digital footprint and restricted access, limited to personally verified security personnel. Lucia considered this. The women won't respond well to another disruption of their recovery environment. They're just beginning to establish trust in current medical personnel and support systems, which is why you'll need to accompany them and continue your work in the new location. Ray understood the balance between security requirements and recovery necessities. Continuity of care through your presence will mitigate disruption impact. As they prepared for relocation, Matthews reported an alarming development. Confirmed breach attempt at the military installation perimeter. Sophisticated approach utilizing falsified military credentials. Intercepted only by enhanced verification protocols. The attempted penetration confirmed Ray's security assessment and justified the relocation decision. More concerning was the sophistication implied. Falsified military credentials suggested resources beyond what Mercer should have been able to access independently after escaping custody. Ray accelerated the relocation timeline, implementing immediate movement protocols. They transferred 12 priority witnesses with direct knowledge of Cerberus operations, along with Lucia as primary medical support, to a private compound Matthews had established through his network, secured through independent contractors with no connection to government systems. As they settled into the new facility, Ray received critical intelligence from Cassandra. Satellite tracking identified Mercer boarding aircraft, registered to subsidiary of consortium, previously connected with Mitchell's land acquisition efforts. Cassandra transmitted satellite imagery, showing a substantial compound in mountainous terrain near Monterrey, Mexico. Intelligence assessment identifies this as primary operations center for the consortium's regional activities. The facility's scale and security features suggested significant resources, consistent with multinational operation rather than standard criminal enterprise. The location in Mexico created jurisdictional complications that would limit official response options. The consortium isn't merely utilizing trafficking for profit, Cassandra explained, forwarding additional documentation. It's part of systematic development of compromised material on key officials, while establishing infrastructure control across border regions. Ray recognized patterns consistent with sophisticated intelligence operation rather than standard criminal enterprise. The strategic positioning, methodical implementation, and long-term operational timeline suggested state-sponsored resources operating through private entities for deniability. Russian intelligence footprint, he noted, identifying characteristic methodologies. Assessment confirms high probability of state intelligence direction disguised as private corporate activities. Cassandra agreed. The consortium provides plausible deniability while implementing strategic objectives aligned with identified Russian intelligence priorities in the region. The implications expanded well beyond the trafficking operation they had initially disrupted. This represented sophisticated penetration of critical infrastructure, potential compromise of security systems, and strategic positioning for long-term intelligence collection across the entire southern border. Operational response options, Ray inquired, already formulating tactical approach. Officially restricted by jurisdictional limitations and diplomatic considerations, Cassandra explained. Unofficially, resources available through oversight. Committee authorization utilizing specialized teams with appropriate deniability protocols. As Ray began developing operational framework for addressing this expanded threat, he realized that what had begun as a personal mission to protect Lucia and honor his promise to Elena had evolved into something far more significant, confronting a sophisticated intelligence operation threatening national security at fundamental levels. The mission had changed, but Ray's core motivation remained consistent: protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit them, regardless of how powerful the exploiters might be, or what justifications they offered for their actions. The headlines broke the following: Morning across major news outlets. Secret government program facilitated human trafficking network. 4. The stories contained extensive documentation, operational directives, financial records, facility locations, and most explosively, client identities, including political figures, diplomats, corporate executives, and military officials. Ray watched the media storm unfold from the secure facility where they had established temporary operational headquarters. The institutional response followed predictable patterns: official denials, claims of manipulated evidence, attempts to characterize Cerberus as a rogue operation without official sanction. Mercer implemented dead man protocols during her capture, Cassandra explained through secure communication. Comprehensive evidence released to multiple media outlets simultaneously, bypassing classification controls and institutional damage management. The evidence was too comprehensive, too meticulously documented to be dismissed through standard damage control. The Oversight Committee established to manage accountability suddenly found itself operating in the harsh light of public scrutiny, rather than behind classified barriers. The director is facing congressional inquiry, Cassandra reported. Oversight committees from both houses are demanding immediate briefings. Multiple international diplomatic channels have opened formal protests regarding their nationals' involvement. And the practical impact on our operations, Ray asked, maintaining focus on immediate priorities rather than institutional fallout. Mixed, Cassandra admitted. Public exposure creates significant pressure for comprehensive accountability, which aligns with our objectives. However, it also triggers defensive responses from implicated parties, including potential threats to witnesses and evidence. Ray studied the satellite imagery of the Monterey compound where Mercer had been tracked. We need to move quickly before she can establish new operational parameters or eliminate additional evidence. Agreed. However, we face significant tactical challenges given the facility's security profile and jurisdictional complications. Cassandra transmitted additional intelligence. Preliminary analysis suggests approximately 30 personnel on site, sophisticated security systems, and potential connection to Mexican government elements providing local protection. Ray began developing tactical approach options, examining insertion vectors, security vulnerabilities, and extraction routes. The facility presented substantial challenges: isolated location, professional security, jurisdictional complications, but also certain exploitable weaknesses identified through imagery analysis. We need specialized personnel for this operation, Ray noted, beyond standard tactical capabilities. Already in progress, Cassandra confirmed. Matthews has identified potential team members with appropriate skills and operational experience, all with necessary deniability characteristics. As operational planning continued, Ray maintained regular communication with Lucia regarding the witnesses' security and recovery progress. The women rescued from Olympus 2 had been integrated with those from previous operations, creating a recovery community where shared experiences provided unique support mechanisms beyond what standard therapeutic approaches could offer. They're making remarkable progress considering the circumstances, Lucia reported through secure channel. Especially now that they feel genuinely safe for the first time in months or years. The security protocols are effective, Ray confirmed. Beyond anything I've seen in standard witness protection, Matthews's team maintains comprehensive surveillance and perimeter security without creating an institutional atmosphere that would trigger trauma responses. Lucia's expression reflected professional assessment combined with personal appreciation. You've created something unique here, security that protects without confining. The observation touched on something Ray had been developing throughout the operation: security approaches that prioritized both physical safety and psychological well-being, rather than institutional convenience or operational efficiency. It represented fundamental evolution from his agency methodologies toward more holistic protection concepts. As planning for the Monterey operation progressed, Ray received unexpected communication from Keller. The Oversight Committee has reviewed your operational proposal, Keller reported through secure channel. Authorization granted with specified resources allocated under deniability protocols. Direct resource coordination through Cassandra to maintain appropriate separation from official channels. The authorization reflected institutional recognition of the threat severity while maintaining necessary distance from potential diplomatic complications. It provided access to significant resources without imposing operational constraints that might compromise effectiveness. Tactical team composition? Ray inquired. 6 operators with appropriate skills certified for cross-border operations. Equipment and insertion vehicles prepared at staging location. Maritime extraction capabilities positioned along Gulf Coast if primary extraction route becomes compromised. Keller's professional demeanor slipped momentarily, revealing genuine concern. This operation carries substantial personal risk, Specter. The facility's security profile suggests state-level resources and capabilities. Risk assessment is included in operational planning, Ray responded neutrally. I'm not talking about statistical probability matrices, Keller said with unusual directness. I'm talking about you personally. This isn't an agency operation with institutional protection parameters. If compromised, you face potential classification as rogue operator conducting unauthorized cross-border intervention. The concern was legitimate, but ultimately irrelevant to Ray's decision-making. The threat represented by Mercer's connection to state-sponsored intelligence activities targeting critical security infrastructure required direct response, regardless of personal risk calculations. Noted, Ray acknowledged. But the operational necessity remains clear regardless of potential complications. Over the next 48 hours, Ray worked with Matthews and the tactical team to finalize operational parameters. They developed primary approach utilizing halo insertion from high-altitude aircraft, tactical movement through mountainous terrain to approach from least monitored vectors, and precision entry through identified security vulnerabilities. The objective: parameters were specific and limited. Locate and secure Mercer for extraction and interrogation, retrieve operational documentation regarding the consortium's broader activities, and identify key network components for subsequent neutralization. The approach prioritized intelligence gathering over confrontation, with tactical engagement only as necessary for objective achievement. As final preparations concluded, Ray visited the secure facility where Lucia and the witnesses remained protected. Despite imminent operational deployment, he felt it necessary to ensure security protocols remained comprehensive during his absence. Everything is prepared for the operation? Lucia asked when they were alone. Yes. Insertion scheduled for 0200 tomorrow. Expected operational duration approximately 6 hours if primary approach remains viable. Lucia studied him with the perceptive assessment that had characterized her throughout their ordeal. You don't have to do this personally, Ray. There are qualified tactical teams available. I do, actually. Ray's certainty wasn't bravado but clear-eyed assessment. My specific operational experience with these methodologies provides tactical advantages that directly impact success probability. That's the analytical justification, Lucia acknowledged. But I suspect there's more to it than operational calculations. Ray considered this, recognizing truth in her observation. His motivation extended beyond tactical necessity to something more fundamental. A sense of personal responsibility for ensuring complete resolution, rather than partial accountability. Elena used to say that starting something worthwhile creates obligation to see it through properly, he said finally. Not just to acceptable conclusion, but to right conclusion. Lucia smiled slightly. She used to say the same thing about my medical studies when I wanted to quit. Halfway healing isn't healing at all. That was her favorite phrase when I complained about difficult courses. The memory created unexpected connection between them. Shared understanding of Elena's influence that transcended professional considerations or operational necessities. For a moment, Ray wasn't the former operative planning high-risk intervention, but simply someone honoring the moral clarity a remarkable woman had helped him rediscover. I'll be careful, he promised, recognizing the concern beneath her professional demeanor. The operational parameters are specifically designed to minimize unnecessary risk while achieving critical objectives. Just make sure you come back, Lucia said simply. These women need ongoing protection from someone who understands both the threat and their experiences, someone they can trust. The responsibility implicit in her words registered deeply. The trafficking victim's recovery and continued security represented commitment extending beyond the immediate operation, or even Mercer's neutralization, ongoing. Obligation to ensure systems designed for their protection actually fulfilled that purpose, rather than serving institutional convenience. As Ray completed final preparations that evening, He reviewed the journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as 5 cartel gunmen entering his bar had evolved into confrontation with sophisticated intelligence operation, threatening fundamental security infrastructure. The path from bar owner defending himself to operational leader planning cross-border intervention seemed implausible, yet somehow inevitable in retrospect. The common thread throughout remained consistent: commitment to protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit them, regardless of how powerful the exploiters might be or what justifications they offered. It was the principle Elena had helped him reclaim from beneath years of operational compromise and institutional pragmatism. As midnight approached, Ray completed final equipment check before joining the tactical team at the staging area. The operation ahead carried significant risks and uncertain outcomes. The consortium's resources and connections suggested formidable opposition beyond anything they had encountered in previous engagements. Yet Ray felt unusual clarity as deployment approached, not the cold operational focus that had characterized Specter's missions, but something more integrated. The tactical precision and operational awareness remained, but now guided by moral certainty rather than institutional directives or abstract strategic objectives. The evolution represented neither rejection of his operational capabilities nor simple return to civilian perspective, but rather integration of professional skills with clear ethical framework, Specter's tactical brilliance directed by Ray Salazar's moral compass. As the team boarded the aircraft that would carry them to the insertion point, Ray allowed himself brief acknowledgement of Elena's continuing influence on his path. She would have understood this mission not as return to violence she had asked him to abandon, but as necessary extension of the protection she had always offered to those in need. Some promises required flexible interpretation in changing circumstances. Some commitments demanded action rather than withdrawal. Some battles couldn't be avoided without betraying deeper principles. As the aircraft lifted into the night sky, Ray prepared himself for the confrontation ahead, not just with Mercer and her network, but with the fundamental choice between institutional convenience and genuine justice, between acceptable compromise and necessary accountability. The outcome remained uncertain, but the obligation was clear. He would see this through to proper conclusion, regardless of personal cost or institutional resistance, not because operational directives demanded it, but because it was right. The cargo plane's engines hummed steadily as it carried Ray and his tactical team toward the insertion point. Unlike standard military teams with uniforms and official designations, this team wore nondescript tactical gear with no identifying markers, ghosts designed to leave no institutional fingerprints. Matthews sat beside Ray, reviewing satellite imagery of the compound. Updated thermal scans show 27 personnel distributed throughout the facility, security concentrations at perimeter positions, and the main structure's central section. Consistent with executive protection surrounding high-value targets, Ray noted. Primary insertion point remains the northward ridge, natural blind spot in monitoring coverage, minimal personnel presence, most challenging physical approach but lowest detection probability. The team leader, a former Delta operator, identified only as Reese, joined their assessment. Drop zone confirmed clear, weather conditions optimal for Halo insertion. Ray maintained focus on the mission parameters. Primary objective remains clear: locate and secure Mercer, recover operational documentation regarding consortium activities, identify key personnel for subsequent action, in and out without alerting regional security assets if possible. His approach reflected the integration of Specter's tactical precision with his renewed moral clarity, minimizing potential collateral damage, limiting engagement parameters, focusing on intelligence recovery rather than facility neutralization. Green light, the loadmaster called, and Reese stepped into emptiness, followed by each team member at 3-second intervals. Ray's jump was precisely timed. The freefall phase lasted approximately 90 seconds before parachute deployment. The specialized chutes, designed for minimal audio and visual signature, functioned perfectly, slowing their descent while maintaining precision approach to the designated landing zone. They touched down within the designated perimeter immediately, securing chutes and transitioning to ground movement. They moved with disciplined silence through mountainous terrain, utilizing natural features for concealment while maintaining tactical formation. The approach to the compound took 40 minutes through challenging terrain. As they neared the outer perimeter, Ray signaled for final approach adjustments. Thermal imaging confirmed security positioning consistent with intelligence assessment. 2-person teams patrolling outer boundaries, automated systems covering expected approach vectors, concentrated presence at main access points. They reached the maintenance access point without detection. Matthews deployed specialized equipment to defeat the locking mechanism while maintaining system integrity to avoid triggering alerts. Within minutes, they had entered the compound's main structure, moving through service corridors. 2 security personnel encountered during the advance were neutralized with non-lethal efficiency. As they approached the central section where thermal imaging had indicated separated quarters with enhanced security, Ray deployed specialized monitoring equipment to assess the current situation before committing to direct engagement. The results confirmed intelligence assessment. 2 security personnel stationed outside what appeared to be executive quarters. Their posture suggested standard protective detail rather than high-alert security, consistent with the facility's presentation as a legitimate business operation. Non-lethal neutralization, simultaneous engagement, Ray ordered. Team 2 maintains corridor security while primary element secures the target area. The engagement proceeded with practiced precision. Security personnel neutralized before defensive response could be implemented. Matthews defeated the locking mechanism on the executive quarters door without alerting internal monitoring systems. Inside, Diana Mercer sat at a desk reviewing documentation displayed on multiple screens. She turned toward the doorway without apparent alarm, her expression calculating rather than surprised. "Efficient approach," she commented. "Though I expected agency response 3 days ago based on standard escalation protocols, you've demonstrated unusual operational restraint." Ray stepped forward while team members secured adjacent areas. "Diana Mercer, you're being detained under authority of Special Oversight Committee established by executive authorization." Mercer's slight smile suggested professional assessment rather than emotional response. "Interesting authorization framework, not standard agency operational parameters. Oversight Committee suggests congressional involvement, though executive authorization indicates administrative control mechanisms." She studied Ray. "A hybrid approach reflecting institutional uncertainty about appropriate response channels." "Where's the consortium's operational documentation?" Ray asked, maintaining professional focus. "Specificity would be helpful," Mercer replied, gesturing to multiple screens. "The consortium maintains extensive operational parameters across multiple domains." "The trafficking network," Ray clarified. "Operational directives, personnel assignments, client relationships, facility locations." Matthews approached with specialized equipment. "Permission to access the system directly." Ray nodded, maintaining focus on Mercer, while Matthews began implementing technical extraction protocols. "You realize the broader strategic implications of your intervention are counterproductive to national security interests," Mercer said. "The consortium's infrastructure development provides essential monitoring capabilities in regions with limited official coverage, justifying human trafficking as intelligence-gathering methodology," Ray noted, voice flat with controlled contempt. "Simplified characterization of complex operational reality," Mercer countered. "The individuals involved received significantly better treatment under managed protocols than through unregulated trafficking networks." "Spare me the bureaucratic rationalization." Mercer studied him with analytical detachment. "You've changed. Since your agency days, Specter, Elena Mendez appears to have fundamentally altered your assessment metrics." The casual reference to Elena was calculated provocation. Ray maintained professional discipline while acknowledging the internal response. "System breach achieved," Matthews reported. "Accessing primary operational database now." "Primary objective secured," he confirmed minutes later. "Operational directives, personnel assignments, client relationships, financial architecture, comprehensive documentation package." As data extraction continued, Ray maintained awareness of broader operational timeline. "Extraction team, status." "Report," he transmitted. "Perimeter secure, no indication of external security response," came the reply. However, vehicle movement detected approaching from Southern Access Road. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. The development accelerated their timeline without fundamentally compromising the operation. They had achieved primary objectives, locating Mercer and securing operational documentation, with extraction router remaining viable despite approaching complications. "Prepare for extraction with primary asset," Ray directed. Mercer would be transported with them rather than left for local authorities. Her direct testimony and technical knowledge represented significant value beyond the documentation alone. As they prepared to move, Mercer made one final observation. You should know the consortium's operational architecture extends beyond this single facility or even Cerberus parameters. What you've compromised represents a tactical component rather than a strategic framework. Meaning? Ray asked. Meaning the operational documentation you've secured reveals implementation methodology rather than strategic objectives, Mercer explained. You've identified how, but not why. They move through the facility with practiced efficiency, retracing their infiltration pathway. The unconscious security personnel remained secured with restraints designed to maintain both effectiveness and physical safety. As they approached the extraction point, the team monitoring external approaches provided updated intelligence. Vehicle approaching security checkpoint at main entrance. 4 occupants visible. Movement patterns suggesting standard arrival rather than security response. The timing remained viable for clean extraction. They reached the maintenance access point and exited the facility, maintaining terrain masked. Movement, while proceeding toward the extraction point, where transportation awaited. 3 hours later, they reached the secondary extraction point, a private airfield where a specialized aircraft awaited for transport to a secure facility. The transition proceeded with professional efficiency. Mercer transferred to the aircraft with appropriate security protocols maintained. As they prepared for departure, Ray contacted Lucia through secure communication. Status, she asked immediately, concern evident despite professional composure. Operation successful. Primary objectives achieved without complications. Returning to secure facility within approximately 4 hours. The relief in her expression was visible despite the encrypted connection's limited resolution. The witnesses have been asking about you. They're concerned about potential consequences from the media exposure and Mercer's escape. Tell them security. Protocols remain comprehensive despite recent developments, Ray assured her. Their protection remains priority, regardless of operational expansions. After ending the communication, Ray turned his attention to preliminary analysis of the extracted documentation. The operational data confirmed their existing understanding of Cerberus implementation, while revealing new connections beyond the immediate trafficking network. The pattern that emerged was disturbing in its sophistication. What had begun as a monitoring operation had evolved into a self-sustaining enterprise generating substantial resources. Financial data showed proceeds being channeled through complex networks of shell companies and offshore accounts, eventually funding black budget operations outside congressional oversight. More concerning was evidence suggesting the operation had developed implicit protection from multiple agencies through strategic client management, providing services to individuals with sufficient authority to prevent investigation or exposure. As they approached the secure facility, Ray's thoughts returned to Lucia's question about what followed operational conclusion. The immediate mission parameters had expanded significantly from protecting Lucia and honoring his promise to Elena, evolving into confrontation with a sophisticated intelligence operation, threatening fundamental security infrastructure. Yet the core motivation remained consistent, protecting the vulnerable from exploitation, regardless of how powerful the exploiters might be. That principle would guide whatever came after current operational necessities concluded. The secure facility's conference room had been transformed into an operational command center, multiple screens displaying data analysis, communication systems, enabling secure coordination with oversight committee representatives, evidence processing stations for documentation extracted during the Monterey operation. Ray stood before the central display where Matthews presented preliminary findings. The trafficking operation functioned as one component within a broader strategic framework, Matthews explained. Cerberus provided both financial resources and compromising material on key officials, but represented approximately 20% of overall operational architecture. Primary strategic objectives, Ray asked. Multiple layers identified, Matthews continued. Infrastructure development, establishing monitoring capabilities across the southern border region. Financial mechanisms, creating influence channels within regulatory frameworks. Political relationships, ensuring operational protection from official investigation. The scale and sophistication suggested resources beyond standard criminal enterprise or private military contractor capabilities. The methodology, compartmentalization, and strategic patience indicated state-level direction consistent with Russian intelligence operations. Oversight Committee Assessment, Ray inquired, focusing on institutional response capabilities. Mixed, Cassandra reported with diplomatic restraint suggesting institutional limitations. Comprehensive briefing provided regarding strategic implications. Response authorization limited by jurisdictional constraints, diplomatic considerations, and evidence parameters. Ray recognized the pattern from previous agency experience. Institutional caution constraining effective response to emerging threats that crossed traditional jurisdictional boundaries. He found Lucia in the medical wing, where she continued coordinating witness recovery. "How are the witnesses progressing?" he asked. "Remarkable resilience considering circumstances," Lucia reported. "The communal support framework has proven particularly effective. Shared experiences creating a unique recovery environment beyond what standard therapeutic approaches could establish." "They're asking about accountability," she continued, lowering her voice. "The media coverage has shown arrests of operational personnel, but they're concerned about the clients, the people who created demand for their exploitation. The Oversight Committee has initiated investigation regarding client involvement," Ray explained. "The documentation secured from Mercer's facility provides comprehensive evidence regarding specific individuals and their operational relationships." "Will that translate to actual consequences?" Lucia pressed. "I'm personally ensuring the evidence reaches appropriate authorities with sufficient visibility to prevent administrative burial," Ray assured her. "The Oversight Committee includes victim advocacy representatives with specific responsibility for ensuring accountability extends beyond operational personnel to include clients and facilitators." Lucia studied him carefully before nodding. "There's something else you should know." One of the women recognized a name in the media coverage, Alexander Volkov, identified as key financial architect for the operations business structures. Ray recognized the name from documentation analysis. Russian financial specialist utilizing banking expertise to create sophisticated laundering mechanisms. "She says Volkov personally visited the facility where she was held, though not as client for trafficking services," Lucia continued. "He was conducting what appeared to be facility inspection, reviewing operational parameters with management personnel and security systems. The information suggested direct operational involvement beyond merely financial architecture. Personal engagement, with implementation details indicating operational role rather than support function." As they continued discussing security considerations and recovery progress, a facility security officer appeared with priority communication notification. "Secure transmission from Oversight Committee representatives, designated urgent priority." Ray moved immediately to the communications center. Assistant Director Chen appeared on the secure display, her expression reflecting institutional concern. "We have critical developments requiring immediate operational response," she began. "Analytical processing of Mercer's documentation has identified imminent threat parameters beyond trafficking operations themselves." "Specific threat vectors?" Ray inquired. "The consortium has established operational capabilities for infrastructure disruption beyond merely monitoring positioning," Chen explained. "Technical specialists recently deployed to 3 primary nodes across the border region with equipment consistent with systems interruption rather than surveillance function. Timeframe assessment. Technical analysis suggests operational window within approximately 72 hours, Chen reported. The pattern indicates coordinated action, positioning for specific operational execution rather than general preparedness. Target assessment. Multiple critical infrastructure systems potentially compromised. Transportation control systems, electrical distribution networks, communication infrastructure, water management systems, all showing vulnerability indicators consistent with preparation for coordinated disruption. The threat assessment represented significant escalation beyond trafficking operations. Potential national security event affecting civilian infrastructure across major population centers. The scale and potential impact warranted immediate response. The Director has authorized special operational framework through Oversight Committee emergency protocols, Chen confirmed. Cross-agency coordination established with appropriate resources, allocated for immediate response under unified command structure. Ray considered the tactical requirements against witness protection priorities. Current witness security assessment? Enhanced protection protocols implemented at all witness facilities, Chen assured him. Military assets deployed for perimeter. Security. Independent verification protocols established for all personnel access. Complete communication, blackout maintained with specialized monitoring for potential compromise attempts. Ray made his decision. I'll coordinate operational implementation while maintaining oversight of witness protection protocols. Matthews remains on-site continuing documentation analysis and security coordination, while I implement direct operational leadership for infrastructure protection response. After concluding the communication, Ray located Lucia to inform her of the developing situation. Her expression reflected immediate understanding of both tactical necessities and personal implications. "They need your operational experience against this expanded threat," she stated, rather than asked. "Critical infrastructure targeting beyond trafficking operations themselves," Ray confirmed. "Requires immediate response with specialized operational approach given consortium methodology and structural understanding." "While you're implementing that response, what happens with witness protection here?" Lucia asked. "Matthews remains on-site continuing documentation analysis and security coordination. Facility protection protocols remain comprehensive with additional resources positioned for rapid response if required." Lucia studied him carefully before stepping forward and embracing him briefly. "Be careful. These women need you to come back. I need you to come back." "I will," Ray promised, meaning it beyond operational assurance. This response addresses immediate threat vector, but doesn't change fundamental commitment to witness protection and recovery support. As Ray prepared for departure, he realized the journey that had begun when 5 cartel gunmen walked into his bar had reached its decisive moment. What had started as protection for one woman had evolved into a mission to protect countless innocent lives from a sophisticated threat. And through it all, Ray had discovered something unexpected. Not a return to being Specter, not a retreat to being just Ray the bartender, but an integration of both that was more powerful and more humane than either alone had ever been. The real test of that integration now awaited him. The Oversight Committee's intelligence had been clear. Despite Mercer and Volkov's capture, a contingency protocol had been activated. Technical specialists still at large had initiated what appeared to be a coordinated infrastructure attack, targeting multiple systems across the border region. Coordinated strikes against power distribution, water management, and transportation. Control systems within 12 hours, Assistant Director Chen explained. A scorched earth response. If they can't control these systems, they'll disable them completely. Ray led the primary tactical team toward a private data center outside Laredo, the central node where satellite imagery showed multiple vehicles arriving within the past 6 hours. Unlike previous operations, this final confrontation required his direct involvement. His unique understanding of consortium methodology provided tactical advantage beyond what could be communicated through briefing materials. The synchronized breach proceeded with precision efficiency. Initial security engagement occurred at precisely anticipated locations, allowing tactical teams to neutralize resistance with controlled precision. As they penetrated the main structure, enhanced security confirmed the facility's critical importance, the digital heart of the consortium's operation. Inside the operations center, multiple displays showed infrastructure system penetration attempts in various stages. Power distribution networks, water management systems, transportation control architecture, all under sophisticated attack through digital channels. The technical specialists froze at their workstations as tactical teams secured the room. One figure remained calmly focused on a central control station, despite the tactical intervention. Ray recognized him from intelligence briefings. Victor Petrov, the consortium's primary technical architect. Unlike the others who abandoned their activities, Petrov continued executing commands with focused determination. "Step away from the console," Ray directed, approaching with weapon positioned. Operation concluded. System access terminated. Petrov activated a final command sequence before physical intervention could prevent completion. The central display changed immediately, flashing warning indicators across multiple infrastructure system representations, countdown sequences initiating on tertiary displays. Contingency protocol, Petrov explained with technical precision. Sequential system failure implementation across critical infrastructure nodes. Non-reversible command architecture with distributed execution parameters. Ray's team immediately accessed the systems. He's initiated cascading failure protocols across multiple infrastructure systems, reported the lead technical specialist. The system utilizes distributed execution nodes with independent activation parameters. Centralized interruption ineffective against designed resilience features. Individual system intervention options? Ray asked, shifting focus from centralized prevention to distributed mitigation. Potentially viable with specific system architecture knowledge and direct access to individual control nodes, the specialist replied. Ray coordinated with Oversight Committee technical resources, implementing emergency access protocols for affected infrastructure systems. Within hours, his teams had neutralized 14 control nodes through direct intervention, stabilized remaining systems through emergency protocols, and minimized civilian impact through prioritization frameworks. All infrastructure systems restored to normal operational parameters under authorized control, confirmed the technical coordinator. Critical functions maintained throughout intervention implementation. Vulnerable populations protected through prioritization frameworks. No significant casualties. As Ray prepared for return to the witness protection facility where Lucia awaited, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as defensive response to an immediate threat had evolved into confrontation with a sophisticated operation threatening fundamental security infrastructure. Throughout that evolution, the core commitment had remained consistent: protecting the vulnerable from exploitation, regardless of how powerful the exploiters might be. That principle had guided operational decisions beyond merely tactical considerations or strategic objectives. When he returned to the facility, Lucia's expression reflected relief beyond functional acknowledgement. "It's finally over," she stated. "Completely neutralized," Ray confirmed. "And you? Beyond merely operational success parameters?" "I'm ready for what comes next," Ray replied with genuine response. "Whatever that might be." Lucia studied him carefully before taking his hand. "Perhaps we'll figure out what comes next together. Integration, rather than selection. Continued purpose beyond merely crisis response." Ray recognized profound opportunity beyond merely pleasant possibility. Genuine partnership integrating shared understanding and mutual respect. "I'd like that," he acknowledged. "Very much." 2 weeks after the infrastructure attack was neutralized, Ray sat on the observation deck of the witness protection facility, watching the sunset paint the distant hills in gold and crimson. The desert landscape reminded him of San Ignacio, though this vista lacked the familiarity of the view from El Coyote's back porch, where he'd spent so many evenings with Eleanor. The sound of footsteps announced Keller's arrival before the man appeared, looking less like a government official in his casual clothes. "Quite a view," Keller remarked, settling into the chair beside Ray. "Official visit or social call?" Ray asked, not turning from the horizon. "Bit of both." Keller placed a folder on the table between them. "The Oversight Committee's final report, thought. You might want to see it before it's formally submitted." Ray opened the folder, scanning the executive summary. The document detailed the complete dismantling of the consortium's network, the prosecution of key personnel, including Mercer and Volkov, and the comprehensive support provided to trafficking victims. Most significantly, it outlined the accountability measures implemented for those who had utilized the network's services: politicians, diplomats, corporate executives facing genuine consequences rather than administrative cover-ups. "The director sends his personal thanks," Keller continued, "and an offer." "I'm not coming back to the agency," Ray said immediately. Keller smiled slightly. "Not what he's proposing. More of a consulting arrangement, independent contractor status, no institutional constraints. Your expertise on specialized cases, on your terms." Ray considered this. "I'll think about it." "That's all he's asking." Keller hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think you found something most of us never do. A way to use your capabilities without losing yourself in the process." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive, coming from a man who had spent decades navigating institutional compromises. "And the witnesses?" Ray asked, turning to practical matters. "Permanent relocation with comprehensive support services, new identities, specialized educational opportunities, ongoing medical and psychological care." The Oversight Committee insisted on lifelong support rather than standard temporary assistance. "And Lucia's role?" "Medical coordinator for the program if she wants it. Her experience makes her uniquely qualified." Keller studied Ray carefully. "Though I suspect her decision might depend on certain other factors." Ray didn't respond to the implied question. Instead, he asked, "San Ignacio? El Coyote? The highway project's been rerouted. Vega's organization is in disarray after his arrest. The town's safe, but..." Keller shrugged. "Your cover there is thoroughly compromised. Too many people know who you were. Who you are." Ray nodded, having already reached the same conclusion. El Coyote had never just been a bar to him. It had been a promise to Elena, a sanctuary where he could be just Ray Salazar. That sanctuary no longer existed, but perhaps the promise could be kept in a different way. After Keller departed, Lucia found Ray still on the observation deck, now watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I just finished debriefing with the relocation team," she said, sitting beside him. "They found excellent placements for most of the women. Specialized educational programs, protected housing, comprehensive support services." "You've done remarkable work with them," Ray observed. They trust you. They're extraordinary women. After everything they've endured, they're focused on building new lives, rather than dwelling on what happened. Lucia's expression softened. Several asked about you. They want to thank you properly before they leave. I didn't do it alone. No, but you were the catalyst. When those 5 gunmen walked into El Coyote, they set something in motion that none of us could have anticipated. Lucia studied him thoughtfully. Sheriff Morales called. He's been keeping an eye on the cantina for you. Says it's gathering dust. Ray smiled faintly. It was gathering dust when I was there. What will you do with it? Sell it, probably. It served its purpose. He turned to face her directly. The question is what comes next. Lucia met his gaze steadily. I've been offered the medical coordinator position for the witness support program. Traveling between placement locations, providing continuity of care, ensuring proper implementation of treatment protocols. You'd be excellent at it. I think so too. She hesitated briefly. The position includes a partner allowance for security consultation, someone with specialized knowledge regarding protection protocols and threat assessment. The implication hung between them, neither a request nor a presumption, but an open door. Continuing what we started here, Ray observed. Integration rather than selection, Lucia reminded him. Using specialized capabilities for genuine protection rather than abstract objectives. Ray considered the possibility, not returning to being Specter, not hiding as merely Ray the bartender, but something new that incorporated both while being limited by neither. Eleanor would approve, he said finally. She always saw people's potential beyond their circumstances. Lucia smiled. She described you once as the most gentle, dangerous man she'd ever met. Ray laughed softly. That sounds like her. So what do you think? About the partner position? I think, Ray said carefully, that it sounds like meaningful work with someone I've come to respect enormously, someone who understands both parts of who I am. Lucia reached across the space between them and took his hand. The gesture was simple but carried meaning beyond words. Connection, possibility, shared purpose. The following morning, Ray visited the common area where the witnesses gathered for their daily recovery activities. Their faces brightened when he entered, expressions reflecting something beyond merely gratitude, recognition of shared journey, mutual transformation. The eldest among them, a woman named Sophia who had emerged as an unofficial leader, approached him directly. We wanted to thank you, she said simply, not just for the rescue, but for seeing us as people worth protecting, for making others see it too. You did the hardest part, Ray replied honestly, surviving, recovering, rebuilding. But not alone, Sophia emphasized. That makes all the difference. As he spoke with the women, hearing their plans for new beginnings and future possibilities, Ray recognized something he hadn't fully appreciated before. His promise to Elena had never really been about abandoning his capabilities, but about using them for the right reasons, protecting rather than merely eliminating, building rather than merely destroying, serving human needs rather than abstract concepts. Later that day, Ray walked through the facility one last time. The witnesses would begin departing for their new placements the following morning. The Oversight Committee's work was transitioning from emergency response to long-term implementation. The immediate crisis had passed. In his quarters, he packed the few belongings he'd accumulated during these intense months. The satellite phone from his agency days went into a secure container for proper disposal. He wouldn't need it anymore. The wedding band he still wore caught the light, and after a moment's reflection, he left it on. Some connections transcended physical presence. Lucia waited for him at the facility entrance, her own bags packed for departure. Matthews stood nearby, finalizing security protocols for the witness transfers. Ready? She asked simply. Ray looked back at the facility that had been the center of this unexpected journey. From a bar owner defending himself to a man who had dismantled an international trafficking network while rediscovering his own humanity in the process. Yes, he said with certainty. I'm ready. As they walked together toward the waiting vehicle, Ray felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with operational conclusion or mission parameters. This wasn't an ending, but a transition. Not abandoning either aspect of himself, but integrating both into something new. The vehicle pulled away from the facility, carrying them toward possibilities neither could have anticipated, when 5 cartel gunmen walked into a forgotten border town cantina and made the worst mistake of their lives: threatening. The only bar owner in Texas with 3 CIA covers, 18 confirmed wetwork operations, and a particular set of skills that never quite retired. Skills that had found their true purpose at last. The small cafe in Barcelona overlooked a plaza where late afternoon sunlight danced across ancient stonework. Ray sat at an outdoor table, sipping espresso while maintaining habitual awareness of his surroundings. Not from operational vigilance but well-practiced caution, some habits remained useful even in this new life. Across the plaza, Lucia emerged from a medical clinic where she'd been consulting with local physicians regarding specialized treatment protocols for trafficking survivors. Her confident stride and professional bearing reflected someone who had found her purpose, not merely practicing medicine, but transforming how trauma victims received care across international boundaries. Ray watched her approach, struck by how their journey had transformed. Them both, the woman who had been Elena's niece, then a nurse in danger, then his partner in dismantling an international network, was now something else entirely. A respected specialist implementing revolutionary treatment approaches, while he provided the security framework that allowed her work to flourish. "Productive meeting?" he asked as she joined him. "Very. They're implementing the integrated treatment protocol next month." Lucia removed her professional jacket, transitioning from doctor to companion with practiced ease. The director mentioned, 3 new survivors arrived last week from Eastern Europe. The referral network is functioning exactly as designed. The network she referenced had emerged from the Witness Protection Program, established after the consortium's dismantling, an international support system connecting trafficking survivors with specialized treatment, education opportunities, and secure placement options. What had begun as crisis response had evolved into sustainable infrastructure, helping hundreds beyond those directly rescued during their operations. "Security assessment?" Lucia asked, the question now standard between them. "Clean. No surveillance. Indicators. No recognition patterns. No security concerns beyond standard urban environment." Ray's response was automatic, but genuine. Professional assessment without operational paranoia or excessive vigilance. 7th consecutive location, without security complications. The observation carried significance beyond merely tactical evaluation. When they'd begun this journey together, every location had required comprehensive security protocols, counter-surveillance measures, and contingency planning. The gradual reduction in security concerns represented genuine progress. The network truly dismantled rather than merely damaged. The threat neutralized rather than merely contained. "I received a message from Sophia this morning," Lucia mentioned, referring to the informal leader among the original witnesses. "She's completed her first semester of medical school. Top of her class despite everything she's been through." "Remarkable. Resilience," Ray acknowledged. Genuine appreciation replacing professional assessment. Though not surprising given what we observed during the initial recovery phase. "She credits you, you know. Says watching you integrate both sides of yourself gave her permission to stop compartmentalizing her own experience. To use what happened rather than merely survive it." Ray considered this with thoughtful reflection, rather than dismissive modesty. Integration rather than selection. Using difficult experiences as foundation rather than obstacle. "Exactly what you've done." Lucia studied him with the perceptive gaze that had been part of their connection since the beginning. "Have you made a decision about Keller's most recent offer?" The question referenced ongoing communication from oversight committee representatives regarding potential expansion of their role beyond merely trafficking survivor support, specialized consultation regarding other vulnerable populations requiring protection beyond standard security parameters or conventional response capabilities. "I'm inclined to accept with specific limitations," Ray replied after considered reflection. "Maintaining operational autonomy, selective engagement parameters, comprehensive ethical oversight beyond merely procedural compliance." "The integration continues," Lucia observed with warm understanding. "Using exceptional capabilities for humanitarian objectives while maintaining moral clarity beyond institutional constraints." The observation captured his evolution perfectly. Neither returning to Specter's compartmentalized efficiency, nor hiding as merely Ray the bartender, but something new incorporating both while being limited by neither. The integration represented personal fulfillment beyond merely professional function or operational effectiveness, meaningful purpose beyond merely skilled implementation, or technical proficiency. Their conversation paused as a server delivered additional coffee and light refreshments. Ray maintained environmental awareness without operational hypervigilance, natural caution rather than professional paranoia, appropriate security consciousness rather than tactical obsession. "Have you decided about the property in San Ignacio?" Lucia asked when they were alone again. The question referenced recent communication from Sheriff Morales regarding final disposition of El Coyote Cantina, the property remaining in Ray's ownership, despite operational exposure and security compromise preventing his return. The decision carried emotional significance beyond merely practical consideration or financial implication, symbolic closure regarding previous chapter before fully embracing current reality. "I think the Scholarship Foundation is the right approach," Ray replied with certainty beyond merely conceptual consideration or theoretical possibility. Using the property sale proceeds to fund educational opportunities for local students while honoring Elena's commitment to community development beyond merely individual accomplishment. Lucia smiled with genuine warmth beyond merely conversational approval or social acknowledgement. She would love that. Education as foundation for genuine opportunity beyond merely abstract potential or theoretical possibility. The decision represented meaningful closure beyond merely administrative resolution or financial disposition, honoring Eleanor's memory through sustainable impact rather than merely symbolic gesture or emotional attachment to physical location. The approach reflected integration beyond merely professional function or personal sentiment. Practical implementation of meaningful purpose beyond artificial separation between emotional significance and functional utility. As afternoon transitioned toward evening, they walked through the ancient city with comfortable familiarity despite temporary residence, appreciating historical significance and architectural beauty while maintaining appropriate security awareness without operational hypervigilance. There, conversation flowed naturally between professional assessment and personal reflection. Integration beyond merely compartmentalized function or artificial separation between operational role and individual identity. "Message from Matthews," Ray noted as his secure phone signaled protected communication. "Oversight Committee confirms comprehensive accountability implementation regarding consortium operations. Final prosecutions proceeding through appropriate channels with sufficient evidence preservation and witness protection beyond procedural requirements or administrative limitations." The update represented meaningful confirmation beyond merely operational validation or professional acknowledgement, genuine accountability beyond merely institutional process or administrative procedure. The outcome reflected their combined commitment to comprehensive justice beyond merely security, enhancement or threat neutralization, human impact prioritized beyond merely operational objectives or strategic considerations. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this, Lucia observed as they paused on an ancient bridge overlooking the city. Not just the travel or the work, but finding purpose that perfectly integrates professional capability and personal commitment beyond artificial separation or forced selection between competing priorities. Ray understood precisely what she meant. Their current reality represented extraordinary evolution beyond reasonable expectation or practical anticipation, meaningful engagement with genuine purpose, beyond merely functional existence or operational implementation within conventional parameters or traditional expectations. Elena once told me that finding the right path isn't about choosing between different aspects of yourself, but discovering how they fit together, he recalled, the memory bringing warmth rather than sadness. She said integration was harder than selection, but infinitely more satisfying. She was right, Lucia agreed, taking his hand with natural ease beyond merely affectionate gesture or emotional expression. Though I suspect even she would be surprised by how completely you've proven her point. As evening settled over the ancient city, they continued their walk through historic streets, comfortable together beyond merely professional partnership or operational collaboration. Their connection had evolved naturally from circumstantial alliance through mutual respect toward genuine partnership, integrating professional cooperation and personal commitment beyond artificial separation or unnecessary compartmentalization. "Tomorrow we head to Geneva for the International Coordination Conference," Lucia noted as they discussed practical logistics beyond merely emotional connection or personal relationship. "Your security briefings scheduled for regulatory representatives, my treatment protocol presentation for Medical Coordination Committee. Then 3 days before Vienna for Survivor Support Network implementation," Ray added, their schedule representing meaningful purpose beyond merely professional function or operational responsibility. Matthews confirmed facility security protocols completed according to our specifications. The conversation reflected perfect integration of operational awareness and personal connection, professional responsibilities and individual relationship, developing simultaneously without artificial separation or unnecessary competition between seemingly contradictory aspects of complex existence. Their partnership demonstrated possibility beyond conventional limitations or traditional expectations, exceptional capability directed toward humanitarian purpose beyond merely institutional function or organizational objective. Later that evening, in their hotel suite, Ray stood at the window overlooking the city lights while Lucia reviewed medical documentation for tomorrow's presentation. The comfortable silence between them reflected connection beyond merely conversation or communication, mutual understanding developed through shared experience and common purpose, transcending conventional relationship parameters or traditional interpersonal dynamics. Sometimes I still expect to wake up behind the bar at El Coyote, Ray admitted with reflective honesty, beyond merely conversational exchange or casual observation. As if everything since those 5 gunmen walked in was just an elaborate dream. Lucia looked up from her work with perceptive understanding beyond merely sympathetic acknowledgement or emotional response. Would that be better or worse than this reality? The question invited genuine reflection beyond merely hypothetical consideration or theoretical comparison, meaningful assessment regarding authentic experience rather than merely abstract potential or imagined alternative. The invitation demonstrated profound connection beyond merely emotional attachment or personal affection, intellectual engagement, and philosophical exploration beyond merely practical partnership or functional collaboration. Ray considered thoughtfully, before responding with genuine honesty beyond merely conversational exchange or social interaction. Different, certainly. Simpler in some ways, emptier in others. Less purpose beyond merely functional existence or basic survival, less connection beyond merely social interaction or community participation. Less integration, Lucia observed insightfully. Exactly, Ray acknowledged with profound recognition. Beyond merely conversational agreement or intellectual acknowledgement, compartmentalization rather than integration, selection rather than incorporation, limitation rather than possibility. His response reflected fundamental transformation beyond merely operational adaptation or professional adjustment. Profound. Evolution integrating seemingly contradictory elements into coherent, whole-capable, extraordinary contribution beyond conventional expectations or traditional limitations, constraining ordinary existence or typical function. As they prepared for tomorrow's responsibilities, Ray reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. What had begun as defensive response to immediate threat had evolved into comprehensive transformation beyond merely professional adaptation or operational adjustment, fundamental integration, creating extraordinary possibility beyond conventional parameters or traditional expectations. When 5 cartel gunmen had walked into El Coyote Cantina 6 months ago, they had indeed made the worst mistake of their lives, not merely threatening someone with exceptional capabilities beyond ordinary skills or typical training, but catalyzing transformation, creating something beyond merely operational effectiveness or tactical efficiency. The integration of Specter's capabilities and Ray Salazar's moral framework had created something different from either previous identity, professional effectiveness, guided by ethical determination beyond institutional constraints, or personal isolation. That integration had found perfect expression through partnership with Lucia. Shared purpose, utilizing specialized capabilities for humanitarian objectives beyond merely professional function or operational role. Their combined contribution extended beyond merely immediate impact or temporary intervention, sustainable transformation, improving vulnerable individuals' lives through structural change beyond merely crisis response or emergency management. Elena would have recognized that reality as fulfillment beyond merely survival or continuation, meaningful engagement with authentic purpose beyond merely functional existence or operational implementation. Their cognition brought profound peace beyond merely acceptance or resignation, genuine satisfaction regarding meaningful contribution beyond merely professional performance or operational success, within limited parameters or restricted objectives. As Ray turned from the window toward shared future beyond merely individual existence or isolated function, He carried certainty beyond merely confidence or conviction. Authentic purpose integrating exceptional capabilities and fundamental humanity toward meaningful contribution beyond conventional limitations or traditional expectations. The integration represented extraordinary possibility beyond merely ordinary potential or typical capability, remarkable opportunity for genuine impact beyond merely functional performance or operational implementation. The man once known as Specter had found his true purpose at last.